The hyperspace window tore open beyond the galactic rim, a rupture in spacetime that registered on no scanner array in the known galaxy. The Asgard vessel Beliskner emerged with mathematical precision, its gray hull gleaming under the light of distant stars as it oriented toward the spiral arms of an unfamiliar galaxy. Inside the ship's crystalline command center, Supreme Commander Thor stood motionless before the holographic display, his large gray eyes reflecting calculations that would have overwhelmed most organic minds. The Asgard were dying. Not the slow decline of a civilization past its prime, but the cellular collapse of a species that had cloned itself into genetic oblivion. Each successive generation degraded further, neurons misfiring, immune systems failing, bodies rejecting consciousness itself. Thor's own form was already showing signs of deterioration that no amount of medical intervention could reverse. They had perhaps 3 cycles before the damage became irreversible. 3 cycles to find a solution that had eluded them for millennia. And then their long-range sensors had detected something impossible. This galaxy, uncharted, unexplored, separated by the intergalactic void, teemed with humanoid life. Thousands of species, billions of genomes, an evolutionary diversity that defied statistical probability. More importantly, preliminary scans suggested genetic structures uncorrupted by artificial manipulation, pristine templates that might hold the key to reversing the Asgard's slow extinction. But the Asgard High Council had learned painful lessons about first contact. Their cold, analytical approach to diplomacy had caused more conflicts than it resolved. They needed intermediaries, beings who understood the nuances of emotion, culture, and the irrational behaviors that seemed hardwired into less advanced species. They needed humans who had proven themselves across 100 worlds. They needed SG-1. The communication came through while Colonel Jack O'Neill was halfway through what he optimistically called tactical planning, and what Major Samantha Carter accurately identified as a nap in the SGC briefing room. The sudden activation of the Stargate's chevrons brought him instantly alert, years of combat reflexes overriding his carefully cultivated image of casual indifference. Unscheduled off-world activation. The announcement echoed through the mountain complex as blast doors sealed and weapons trained on the event horizon. But instead of the usual incoming wormhole, the gate remained dormant while every computer system in the facility simultaneously displayed the same message in precise, unaccented English, SG-1. Your presence is required. The Asgard need your assistance in a matter of galactic significance. Prepare for transport to the Beliskner. Well, that's not ominous at all, O'Neill muttered, already moving toward the gate room where Carter, Daniel Jackson, and Teal'c were assembling. Carter was running diagnostics on equipment that had spontaneously activated, while Daniel adjusted his glasses with the particular expression that meant he was already formulating 17 hypotheses. Teal'c simply raised an eyebrow, the Jaffa equivalent of profound concern. Colonel, the gate didn't activate, but something established a direct interface with our systems, Carter explained, fingers flying across her tablet. The encryption is Asgard, definitely, but the power signature is off the charts. Wherever Thor is, he's not in our galaxy. Kids, I have a bad feeling about this, O'Neill said, checking his P90 with practiced efficiency. Teal'c, you getting any weird vibes? I am experiencing what you would term weird vibes, O'Neill, Teal'c confirmed, staff weapon held ready. The Asgard do not make requests lightly. Daniel was already at the base of the ramp, staring up at the inactive Stargate with the intensity he usually reserved for ancient artifacts. If they pulled us directly instead of just dialing in, whatever this is, it's big. And probably dangerous. And definitely going to complicate our lives in ways we can't predict yet. Story of our lives, Daniel, O'Neill said. Then, louder, addressing the empty air with the confidence of someone who'd been abducted by advanced aliens enough times to have a system, okay, Thor, we're ready. Try not to beam us into anything solid this time. The Asgard transport beam answered immediately. White light enveloped SG-1, their molecules disassembled and reassembled across impossible distances in the span of a heartbeat. When the light faded, they stood in the Beliskner's command center, and through the viewport stretched a sight that froze even O'Neill's perpetual commentary. A galaxy. Not their galaxy, but another one entirely, its spiral arms glowing with billions of stars, close enough that individual systems were visible as distinct points of light. They were in intergalactic space, farther from Earth than any human had ever traveled. "Welcome, SG-1, Thor said, his synthesized voice carrying undertones of something the Asgard rarely displayed, desperation. "I apologize for the abrupt summons, but time is a luxury my people no longer possess. What I am about to ask of you will challenge everything you understand about first contact protocols, ethics, and the acceptable limits of survival." Carter was already at a console, her scientific curiosity overriding shock as she absorbed the sensor data. "Thor, this galaxy. There are thousands of inhabited systems. The biodiversity readings are incredible. How is this possible?" "That is precisely why we need your help, Major Carter," Thor replied. A holographic display materialized, showing the double helix structure of DNA, but this version was degrading, sections highlighted in warning colors. "The Asgard are dying. Our reliance on cloning technology has created a genetic cascade failure. Each generation is weaker than the last. We have exhausted every possibility within our own galaxy, every species we have encountered." But here, the display shifted to show dozens of humanoid species, their genetic codes pristine and diverse. "Exists a concentration of compatible genetic material that defies probability. You want to harvest DNA from an entire galaxy of people who don't know you exist," Daniel said quietly, and it wasn't a question. His expression had shifted into what O'Neill privately called moral complexity mode, brow furrowed, jaw tight, the look of a man already calculating the ethical cost. "We want to request genetic samples through proper diplomatic channels," Thor corrected. "Which is why we need you. The Asgard are not skilled in the subtleties required for such negotiations. You, however, have successfully negotiated with the Nox, the Tal'an, dozens of human civilizations, even the Takare. You understand how to approach cultures with different values, different fears. And in return?" O'Neill asked, because there was always a price, and it was better to know it up front. "In return, we will help you acquire technology from this galaxy," Thor said. "Our scans indicate scientific advancement in areas even the Asgard find intriguing. Energy weapons that function on principles unknown to us. Artificial intelligence that approaches true consciousness. Medical technology that may prove useful in your conflict with the Goa'uld. We will provide transport, protection, and technical support. Any technology you obtain through diplomatic means, you may keep." Teal'c stepped forward, his warrior's instinct cutting through the theoretical. "What resistance should we expect? This galaxy is embroiled in a massive civil war." Thor brought up tactical displays showing fleet movements, planetary sieges, battles spanning entire star systems. A democratic republic fights against a separatist movement backed by corporate interests. There are also warrior cultures, criminal organizations, and most puzzling, he highlighted several individuals whose biosignatures glowed with unusual energy. Beings who appear to manipulate energy fields in ways our sensors cannot fully explain. They call it the Force. It may be related to their genetic structures. Carter's eyes widened. "Thor, if we're talking about introducing Asgard technology to a galaxy already at war, we will exercise extreme caution, Major. But consider what Earth stands to gain. Hyperspace technology more efficient than our own. Defensive shields. Weapons that could turn the tide against the Goa'uld. Medical advances that could save millions. All we ask is that you act as our diplomatic representatives, our face to these species, while we conduct the research necessary to save our civilization." O'Neill looked at his team. Carter was already mentally cataloging potential technologies. Daniel wore his "this will end badly but I can't say no" expression. Teal'c gave a single nod, if the Asgard asked, the debt of honor demanded consideration. "Alright," O'Neill said finally. "But we do this our way. No abductions, no secret experiments, no treating people like lab rats. We make first contact, we explain the situation honestly, and we negotiate like civilized beings. Even if it takes longer." "Agreed," Thor said. "I have already selected an initial contact point, a planet-spanning city called Coruscant, the capital of the Galactic Republic. It appears to be a center of political and cultural power. If we can establish relations there, it may provide access to the wider galaxy." "Great," O'Neill sighed, already checking his gear. "Carter, break out the 'we come in peace' protocols. Daniel, start working on a speech that doesn't make us sound like body snatchers. Teal'c, look intimidating but friendly. I shall endeavor to achieve both, O'Neill." The Beliskner turned toward the galaxy, its hyperdrive engines charging with a sound that resonated through the hull. Through the viewport, Coruscant became visible, a jewel of light, an entire planet transformed into one continuous city. Somewhere down there, billions of beings went about their lives, unaware that visitors from beyond the galactic rim were about to change everything. "One more thing, Thor," O'Neill said as they prepared for descent. "This force thing, the people who can manipulate energy, how dangerous are we talking?" Thor's large eyes blinked once, slowly. "Our sensors detected one individual levitating a starship with focused thought alone, Colonel. I suggest approaching such beings with considerable caution." "Perfect," O'Neill muttered. "Just once, I'd like to visit a galaxy that doesn't have psychic space wizards." The Beliskner engaged its cloaking field and dropped into the planet's atmosphere, invisible to the scanners of the civilization below. SG-1 stood ready, weapons checked, diplomatic protocols reviewed, aware that they were about to make first contact not with a single species, but with an entire galaxy at war. And somewhere in the depths of Coruscant, in chambers both light and dark, beings sensitive to the Force felt a disturbance, a ripple in the cosmic fabric, as if the galaxy itself had just noticed something that didn't belong. If you want to see more crossover stories where your favorite characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd love to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The Jedi Temple rose above Coruscant's endless cityscape like a monument to order itself, its 5 spires reaching toward a sky choked with traffic lanes and industrial haze. Inside the council chamber at the pinnacle of the central tower, 12 of the galaxy's most powerful Force users sat in contemplative silence, their collective awareness extending across the planet and beyond. Master Yoda's ears twitched with irritation. A disturbance in the Force, faint but persistent, like a blind spot in his perception where something should exist but didn't. "Feel it, do you?" Yoda asked, his gnarled fingers gripping his Jimmer stick. Around the circular chamber, the other council members nodded with varying degrees of concern. Mace Windu leaned forward, his dark features creased with concentration. 4 presences. Humanoid, definitely alive, but, he trailed off, frustration evident. "It's like they're behind frosted glass. I can sense them, but the Force doesn't flow through them the way it should. Not blocked, not absent, just, different." "And the ship?" Ki-Adi-Mundi asked, his elongated head tilting as he reached out with his senses toward the anomaly hovering in high orbit. "Also strange," Shaak Ti confirmed. "Technology unlike anything in our databases. The Republic's orbital sensors never detected it entering the system. It simply appeared, as if it materialized from hyperspace without a gravitational signature. Perhaps we should consider the possibility that these are not hostile actors," Obi-Wan Kenobi suggested from his position in the circle. The younger master stroked his beard thoughtfully. "The ship maintains a defensive posture but has made no aggressive moves. If they wanted to attack, they've had ample opportunity." "Opportunity, yes," Yoda agreed. "Wisdom to wait, perhaps they have. Or planning something more subtle, they are." His eyes narrowed. "Send a delegation, we must." but carefully chosen. Obi-Wan, with me you will come. And young Skywalker, good experience for him, this will be. In the Beliskner's transport room, SG-1 prepared for what Daniel kept calling, potentially the most significant first contact in human history, while O'Neill kept calling, another Tuesday. Carter had configured her tablet to interface with Asgard sensors, giving them real-time data on the planet below. The readings were staggering. "Colonel, the population density is beyond anything we've encountered," she reported, eyes wide. Preliminary estimates suggest over 1 trillion sentient beings on this single planet. The energy consumption alone should have burned through their resources centuries ago, but they've somehow sustained it. 1 trillion, Daniel repeated, his voice carrying a mix of awe and anxiety. That's 1,000 times Earth's population. The cultural complexity alone, we could spend lifetimes studying this place and barely scratch the surface. Which is why we're starting with the people in charge, O'Neill said, adjusting the straps on his tactical vest. Thor had provided them with translation devices, small neural interfaces that would allow them to understand and speak the local language, something called BASIC. "Thor, what's our cover story?" The Asgard's holographic form materialized beside them. "We have prepared credentials identifying you as diplomatic representatives from the Intergalactic Alliance, a confederation of systems beyond the galactic rim. It is technically accurate while avoiding specifics that might complicate initial negotiations." IA, O'Neill tested the abbreviation. "Great. Very official sounding. What could possibly go wrong?" "Colonel, the Jedi are requesting communication," Thor announced. 3 individuals are approaching our position. Their energy signatures match those we identified as Force users. I recommend extreme caution. One of them registers power levels that approach what we would classify as a significant threat. "Define significant threat," Carter asked. "Capable of deflecting energy weapons with focused thought. Possibly able to influence neural chemistry through proximity. Enhanced reflexes beyond normal humanoid parameters." The eldest one, designated Yoda, appears to be the most powerful biological entity we have detected in this galaxy. Teal'c's expression remained neutral, but his grip on his staff weapon tightened slightly. "Then we should ensure we do not give them reason to demonstrate this power." The communication channel opened with a soft chime. An elderly humanoid appeared on the holographic display, small, green-skinned, with pointed ears and eyes that seemed to contain centuries of accumulated wisdom. When he spoke, his syntax was inverted in a way that the translation matrix struggled to parse correctly. "Unknown vessel, the Jedi Council greets you. Identify yourselves, you will. And explain your presence in Republic space, you must." O'Neill stepped forward, adopting what he called his diplomatic face, slightly less sarcastic than usual. "Master Yeti." "Yoda," Daniel hissed. "Master Yoda, I'm Colonel Jack O'Neill, leader of SG-1, diplomatic representatives of the Intergalactic Alliance. We come in peace with a proposal that could benefit both our peoples. We'd like to request a formal meeting to discuss potential cooperation." There was a long pause. O'Neill could almost feel those ancient eyes analyzing him, weighing his words, searching for deception. "From beyond the galactic rim, you claim to be. Felt your arrival in the Force, we did. Strange, your presence is. Not part of the living Force, yet alive you are. Explain this, can you?" Carter leaned toward O'Neill and whispered, "They're sensing something different about us. The Force might be this galaxy's fundamental energy field, and we're not connected to it. We come from a galaxy with different, physical properties," Daniel interjected smoothly, stepping into view. "Our interaction with what you call the Force may be limited by our extragalactic origin. We mean no offense and are eager to learn about your culture and share knowledge in return." Another pause, longer this time. "Then, to the temple, you will come. Unarmed, preferably. Though expect you to comply with this, I do not." O'Neill glanced at his team. Carter's hand rested near her sidearm. Teal'c's fingers drummed once against his staff weapon, the Jaffa equivalent of deep skepticism. Daniel had already started cataloging questions he wanted to ask. "We'll arrive armed as a precaution, but with weapons holstered," O'Neill said. "Standard diplomatic protocol. We're soldiers, Master Yoda, but we're not here to fight. We're here to talk." Soldiers who talk, Yoda's tone suggested this was a rare and possibly suspicious combination. "Interesting, this will be. Coordinates transmitting, we are. 1 hour, you have. Late, do not be." The channel closed. O'Neill turned to Thor. "Well, that went better than the time we met the Nox." "Colonel, we should discuss approach strategy," Carter said, already pulling up schematics of the Jedi Temple that the Beliskner sensors had mapped. "If these Force users can sense emotional states or detect deception, we need to be completely honest about our intentions." "Agreed," Daniel added. "But we also need to be careful about how much we reveal. If they learn the Asgard are desperate, it changes the negotiating dynamic. And if they discover we're looking for genetic material," he trailed off meaningfully. "They will perceive us as exploiters," Teal'c finished. "I have experience with those who use others as resources. The Goa'uld have made such perception a considerable obstacle in gaining allies." O'Neill considered this. "So we lead with the truth, we're from another galaxy, we're exploring, we're interested in cultural exchange and mutual benefit. We mention the Asgard need help but keep the details vague until we've established trust. And we absolutely do not mention anything about DNA collection until we understand their ethics around genetic research." "The Kaminoans," Thor interjected, displaying information on a species of tall, gray-skinned beings. "This species operates extensive cloning facilities. They may be our best chance for obtaining both genetic samples and technical assistance. However, they maintain strict contracts with the Republic military. Approaching them will require navigating significant political complexity. One crisis at a time," O'Neill said. "First, we don't get killed by psychic space monks. Then we worry about cloners." The Beliskner descended through Coruscant's atmosphere, cloaked and silent, settling onto a designated landing platform adjacent to the Jedi Temple. The platform was surrounded by temple guards. Silent sentinels in ornate armor carrying double-bladed yellow lightsabers. As SG-1 materialized via Asgard transport beam, the guards shifted into ready positions, weapons ignited with a distinctive snap hiss that sent crackling energy blades extending from their hilts. "Those are lasers," Carter breathed. "Sustained plasma contained in a magnetic field. The energy requirements alone." "Carter, later," O'Neill said. "Right now, let's focus on not getting cut in half by laser swords." A figure approached across the platform, humanoid, elderly, leaning on a Jimmer stick but moving with a grace that defied his apparent age. Master Yoda stopped 3 meters away, his eyes scanning each member of SG-1 with an intensity that felt almost physical. Behind him came Obi-Wan Kenobi and a younger man with sandy hair and a mechanical right hand, Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One, though SG-1 had no context for that title. "Interesting," Yoda said finally. "In the Force, like holes you are. Present, but not present. Alive, but not connected. Come, to the council chamber we will go. Questions, many we have." As they walked through the temple's corridors, Daniel's head swiveled constantly, taking in architectural details, observing robed figures of dozens of species, noting the peaceful atmosphere that pervaded the structure. "Master Yoda, your temple is remarkable. How long has the Jedi Order existed?" "Over 25,000 years, the Order has served the Republic," Yoda replied. "Guardians of peace and justice, we are. Though in these troubled times, soldiers we have become." "The war with the Separatists," Obi-Wan added, falling into step beside Daniel. "You're aware of the conflict?" "We've monitored communications," Carter confirmed. "A galaxy-wide civil war between the Republic and a coalition of corporate interests. It's Extensive. Extensive, Anakin said with a bitter laugh. That's one word for it. 3 years of battles across hundreds of systems, millions dead, and no end in sight. His blue eyes fixed on O'Neill. You said you're soldiers. Whose side are you on? Neither, O'Neill said bluntly. We just got here. We're not taking sides in a war we don't understand. Wise, perhaps, Yoda said. Or foolish. In this galaxy, neutral parties few and far between, they are. They entered the council chamber, and SG-1 found themselves standing at the center of a circle of Jedi Masters whose collective attention felt like a weight pressing down from all sides. Yoda took his seat, and the questioning began in earnest. Your ship, Mace Windu said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. It appeared without warning, evaded our sensors, and demonstrates technology we've never encountered. You claim to represent an intergalactic alliance, yet you arrive with weapons and refuse to fully disclose your purposes. Give us one reason we should trust you. O'Neill met Windu's gaze without flinching. Because we're asking for your help instead of taking what we need. We could have stayed hidden, collected information covertly, and left without you ever knowing we were here. Instead, we're standing in front of you, honest about being strangers, hoping to establish diplomatic relations. That count for anything? Mace's expression didn't change, but something in his posture relaxed fractionally. It counts for something. Now tell us what you really want. Daniel stepped forward, and O'Neill recognized the shift in his friend's demeanor. This was Dr. Jackson, the archaeologist, the diplomat, the man who had talked down planetary governments and defused interstellar incidents with nothing but words and genuine empathy. We represent an ancient species called the Asgard, Daniel began. They're facing a crisis that threatens their entire civilization, a genetic degradation caused by millennia of cloning. They've exhausted all options in our galaxy and discovered yours by chance. The diversity of life here, the variety of humanoid species, represents potential solutions to their problem. In exchange for help, for genetic samples willingly given, for access to your medical and cloning technology, the Asgard are willing to share their own advanced technology and facilitate cultural exchange. Genetic samples, Plo Koon repeated, his masked face tilting. You want to harvest DNA from the species of this galaxy. Request, Carter corrected firmly. Not harvest. Request, through proper diplomatic channels, with full informed consent. The Asgard don't abduct or experiment without permission. They're ethical beings facing extinction, looking for hope. The council members exchanged glances, communicating in a way that suggested more than just visual cues, the Force, O'Neill realized, watching them share information telepathically. Feel the truth in your words, I do, Yoda said slowly. But felt also, I do, the desperation. Desperate beings, dangerous they can become. Which is exactly why we're here, O'Neill said. The Asgard know they're not good at this. They're scientists, not diplomats. So they asked us, humans from a planet called Earth, to act as intermediaries. We've got experience negotiating with alien species, establishing treaties, building alliances. We're not perfect, but we try to do things the right way. And the technology you offer in return? Obi-Wan asked. What capabilities are we discussing? Transport technology that can beam people and objects across distances instantly, Carter said, warming to the technical discussion. Shields more efficient than anything we've seen in your databases. Energy weapons. Medical scanners. And in return, we're interested in your hyperdrive technology, your droid AI, your medical advances, anything that could help us in our own conflict back home. You fight a war as well? Anakin asked, and something in his tone suggested kinship, warrior to warrior. Against parasitic aliens called the Goa'uld, Teal'c spoke for the first time, his deep voice resonating in the chamber. They enslave entire populations, claiming to be gods. I was once their servant. Now I fight to free those still in bondage. Any technology that aids this fight serves the cause of freedom. Yoda's ears perked up. A warrior seeking freedom for others. Familiar, this sounds. Much like young Skywalker's own path, it is. The council deliberated in that telepathic way again, and SG-1 waited, acutely aware that the next few minutes would determine whether they gained allies or made very powerful enemies. Finally, Mace Windu spoke. The council will take your proposal under advisement. However, the decision to share genetic material isn't ours alone to make. The Republic Senate would need to approve any such agreement. We can arrange an introduction to Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, but be warned, the Senate is a complex political body, and with the war consuming resources, they may not be receptive to extragalactic requests. We understand, Daniel said. We're prepared for a lengthy negotiation process. There is another concern, Shaak Ti said. This cloning crisis you describe, the Kaminoans have produced millions of clone soldiers for the Republic. If your Asgard friends approach Kamino seeking assistance, it could complicate our military operations. O'Neill caught the implication immediately. You're worried we'll interfere with your clone army production. Or steal the technology, Anakin added bluntly. We're not thieves, Carter said sharply. And we're not interested in creating armies. The Asgard need genetic diversity to save their species, not soldiers. Perhaps, Yoda said. But intentions good, results sometimes bad nonetheless. Careful, we all must be. Trust, earned slowly it is. He stood, leaning heavily on his stick. Tomorrow, to the Senate you will go. Tonight, guests of the temple you are. Quarters, we will provide. Meditate on your path, you should. The Force brought you here for a reason, even if touch you directly, it does not. As temple guards escorted them to guest chambers, O'Neill hung back with his team. Well, that could have gone worse. Could have gone better too, Carter muttered. They're suspicious, and they should be. We're asking for biological material from their citizens while offering technology that could shift the balance of their war. The Senate concerns me more, Daniel said. Politicians in the middle of a war, approached by strangers with advanced technology. This could get complicated fast. Indeed, Teal'c agreed. We must consider that not all factions in this galaxy will view our arrival with the Jedi's restraint. There may be those who seek to use us for their own purposes. In orbit, Thor monitored the exchange through sensors that could penetrate even the temple's shielded walls. The Asgard made calculations, adjusted probabilities, considered contingencies. The Jedi were cautious but not hostile. That was acceptable. What concerned him more were the other signals his ship was detecting: cloaked surveillance, encrypted communications, shadowy observers who watched SG-1 with interest that felt predatory. And deep in the Senate building, in an office lined with priceless art and filled with the scent of political power, Supreme Chancellor Palpatine received a report about unusual visitors. His smile never touched his eyes as he began to plan how best to use these unexpected pieces on his galactic chessboard. The guest quarters in the Jedi Temple were Spartan but comfortable, smooth stone walls, simple furniture, and viewports that offered a dizzying perspective of Coruscant's endless cityscape. O'Neill stood at the window, watching streams of aerial traffic flow between skyscrapers that vanished into the clouds above and descended into canyons of light below. Somewhere in that impossibly vast city, trillions of beings lived their lives, completely unaware that visitors from another galaxy were negotiating for pieces of their genetic code. Carter had commandeered the room's single desk, her tablet interfaced with the Beliskner's computers, absorbing data on the Republic's technological infrastructure. Colonel, the more I analyze their systems, the more impressive it becomes. Their hyperdrive technology achieves faster-than-light travel through an alternate dimension they call hyperspace. It's conceptually similar to our hyperspace windows, but the execution is completely different. If we could integrate their NAV computer algorithms with Asgard hyperspace generators. We'd have ships that could cross galaxies in days instead of weeks, O'Neill finished. Which would be great for fighting the Goa'uld. Assuming we can actually get our hands on it without starting an intergalactic incident. Daniel sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by data pads that the Jedi had provided, historical records, cultural databases, political treatises. His expression cycled between fascination and concern. Jack, the ethical complexity here is staggering. The Republic has been cloning sentient beings for 3 years to fight their war. Millions of identical soldiers, all genetically engineered from a single template, treated as property by some, as brothers by others. If we approach the Kaminoans about helping the Asgard, we're essentially legitimizing a system that's morally questionable at best. The Jaffa were bred to serve as hosts and warriors for the Goa'uld, Teal'c said quietly from his position by the door, staff weapon leaning against the wall within easy reach. I do not judge the clones for their origin, but I question the wisdom of those who create life solely for war. It is a path that leads to suffering. A soft chime interrupted the discussion. The door slid open to reveal Obi-Wan Kenobi, alone this time, his robes immaculate and his expression carefully neutral. I hope I'm not intruding. Master Yoda thought it might be beneficial if we spoke informally, without the Council's oversight. Come in, O'Neill gestured to a chair. We were just discussing the moral quagmire we've walked into. Obi-Wan settled into the offered seat with the controlled grace of a trained warrior. The clone army is complicated. When the war began, we discovered that a former Jedi Master had secretly commissioned their creation a decade ago. We still don't fully understand why or who funded the project. But faced with a separatist droid army numbering in the trillions, the Republic had little choice but to accept the clones as our military force. You don't sound entirely comfortable with that, Daniel observed. I'm not, Obi-Wan admitted. The clones are good men, brave, honorable, loyal beyond measure. But they were created for a purpose they never chose, to fight a war they had no voice in starting. Every Jedi general struggles with the responsibility of commanding beings who exist solely because we needed soldiers. Carter looked up from her tablet. Master Kenobi, we're not here to judge your choices. We're trying to understand the context we've entered. If we approach the Kaminoans, what kind of reception should we expect? The Kaminoans are scientists first, everything else second, Obi-Wan explained. They view cloning as an art form, a technical achievement to be perfected. They're proud of their work and protective of their techniques. If the Asgard can offer them new genetic challenges, new problems to solve, they might be interested. But they're also deeply pragmatic, they'll want something of equal value in return. Technology exchange, O'Neill said. The Asgard have cloning technology too, just failing cloning technology. Maybe there's mutual benefit, the Kaminoans help fix what's breaking down, the Asgard share their own methods. Perhaps, Obi-Wan said. But there's another complication. Kamino's contract with the Republic is exclusive. If they begin working with an outside party, especially one offering advanced technology, the Senate will have concerns. And the Separatists would be very interested in acquiring whatever the Asgard might share. Which brings us to tomorrow's Senate meeting, Daniel said. What should we expect? Obi-Wan's expression darkened. Politics. Bureaucracy. Self-interest masquerading as civic duty. The Senate was paralyzed by corruption and gridlock even before the war. Chancellor Palpatine has managed to consolidate power and push through necessary wartime measures, but every decision requires navigating 1,000 competing interests. Some senators will see your arrival as an opportunity. Others will see it as a threat. And a few will simply see it as leverage for their own agendas. Sounds like Washington, O'Neill muttered. There's one senator you should be particularly wary of, Obi-Wan continued. Senator Bail Organa of Alderaan. He's intelligent, principled, and extremely influential. If he opposes your proposal, many others will follow his lead. But if you can convince him of your good intentions, he could be a powerful ally. And the Chancellor? Carter asked. Palpatine. He's been in office far longer than his term should have allowed, Obi-Wan said carefully. Emergency powers granted during the war. He's proven effective at maintaining Republic unity, but some worry about the concentration of authority in his hands. The Jedi Council, we have concerns, though nothing concrete. Trust your instincts around him. The Jedi Master stood, preparing to leave, then paused. One more thing. Anakin was quite interested in your team, particularly in you, Teal'c. He sees a kindred spirit, a warrior who broke free from slavery to fight for others' freedom. He may seek you out. Anakin is impulsive, passionate, sometimes reckless. But his heart is good, even if his judgment occasionally falters. After Obi-Wan departed, the team reconvened. O'Neill pulled up a holographic display from Carter's tablet, showing the Republic's Senate building, a massive mushroom-shaped structure that dominated an entire district of Coruscant. All right, game plan, O'Neill said. Tomorrow we go into the political meat grinder. Daniel, you're taking point on the diplomatic speech. Carter, technical details and feasibility arguments. Teal'c, you're our moral authority. The guy who lived under tyranny and chose freedom. I'll handle the military assessment angle and try not to offend anyone too badly. A challenging role for you, O'Neill, Teal'c said with the faintest hint of amusement. I'm versatile, O'Neill shot back. Thor, you monitoring this? The Asgard's holographic form materialized in the center of the room. Continuously, Colonel. I must inform you of a concerning development. Our sensors have detected multiple surveillance devices monitoring your quarters. Additionally, there are encrypted communications referencing your arrival that originate from outside the Jedi Temple. The Separatists? Carter asked. Unknown. The encryption is sophisticated, suggesting a well-funded intelligence operation. I recommend assuming that everything you do and say from this point forward is being observed by multiple parties. Great, O'Neill sighed. No pressure. The night cycle on Coruscant brought no true darkness, the city's lights blazed continuously, turning night into a different shade of day. But in the depths of the Senate building, in rooms shielded from surveillance and protected by layers of security, other meetings were taking place. Count Dooku stood in the center of a holographic conference chamber, his elegant features illuminated by the blue glow of transmitted images. Around him, the leaders of the Separatist Alliance appeared as life-sized projections, Wat Tambor of the Techno-Union, Sanhil of the Intergalactic Banking Clan, Poggle the Lesser of the Geonosians. This intergalactic alliance, Dooku said, his cultured voice carrying aristocratic disdain, represents either an opportunity or a threat. Intelligence suggests their technology surpasses even our most advanced systems. If the Republic gains access to such capabilities, it could shift the balance of the war. Then we must ensure the Republic does not gain such access, Wat Tambor's mechanical voice responded. The Techno-Union would be very interested in acquiring samples of this technology. Perhaps we could make our own offer to these visitors. They came to the Jedi first, Poggle clicked in his insectoid language, translated by protocol droids. That suggests Republic sympathies. Or ignorance, Dooku countered. They are strangers here, unfamiliar with our conflict. They approached the most visible authority, the Jedi Temple, the seat of Republic power. But they claim to be neutral, to represent a dying species seeking salvation. Desperation makes beings flexible in their allegiances. What does Lord Sidious counsel? Sanhil asked, and the question carried weight that silenced all other discussion. Dooku's expression remained carefully neutral. Lord Sidious believes we should observe for now. Allow the Republic to make its overtures. If they succeed, we will adapt. If they fail, we will present an alternative. These visitors are a wild card in a carefully orchestrated game. We must ensure they do not disrupt the grand design. In another part of the city, in a warehouse district far from the gleaming Senate towers, a different kind of meeting was underway. Cad Bane, the galaxy's most notorious bounty hunter, studied holographic images of SG-1 with the cold assessment of a predator evaluating prey. Technology beyond anything in the Republic databases, his Hutt employer's voice rumbled through the communicator. Weapons, shields, transport systems. The Hutt cartel wants samples, Bane. Alive if possible, dead if necessary, but we want that technology. It'll cost extra, Bane said, his red eyes glinting. These aren't ordinary targets. They've got the Jedi's protection, and their ship is something special. I'll need a crew, specialized equipment, time to plan. You'll have whatever you require. But understand, Bane, you're not the only one interested in these visitors. Half the galaxy's intelligence services are scrambling to make contact. Whoever acquires their technology first gains a significant advantage. Don't disappoint me. The hologram winked out. Bane holstered his twin blaster pistols and smiled without warmth. Don't disappoint the Hutts, he muttered. As if I've ever failed a contract. Back in the temple, SG-1 settled into an uneasy rest. Daniel lay awake, troubled by the moral implications of their mission. Carter ran calculations late into the night, trying to determine fair exchange rates for technology they didn't fully understand. Teal'c meditated in the Jaffa way, achieving a state of restful awareness that kept him alert to danger. And O'Neill stood at the window, watching the city's endless flow, thinking about the conversation with Obi-Wan. The Jedi had concerns about their Chancellor. The clone army existed because of a mysterious decade-old commission. The war showed no signs of ending despite 3 years of constant fighting. Something felt wrong about all of it. Not obviously wrong, not provably wrong, but wrong in the way that made his combat instincts itch. Like walking into an ambush site where the enemy had swept away their tracks but left the smell of gun oil in the air. Thor, he said quietly, knowing the Asgard was listening. Run a deep analysis on this war. Not just the tactical stuff, the patterns, the political outcomes, who benefits from it continuing. I want to know if we're walking into someone else's game. Analyzing, Colonel, Thor responded. However, I should note that the complexity of galactic politics makes definitive conclusions difficult. There are too many variables, too many actors with competing interests. I know, O'Neill said. But humor me. Because if there's one thing I've learned in all our years going through the Stargate, it's that when something feels too complicated to be coincidence, it usually is. In the Beliskner's medical bay, an Asgard scientist named Loki examined genetic samples collected from atmospheric analysis, skin cells, hair follicles, organic particulates shed by the billions of beings living on Coruscant. The diversity was astounding, each sample representing a unique evolutionary path, a different solution to the problem of sentient life. But the degradation in the Asgard genome was accelerating. Loki's own body showed signs of cellular breakdown that would become critical within months. They needed more than atmospheric samples. They needed access to intact, sequenced genomes. They needed the cooperation of beings who might not understand the desperation that drove a species to the brink of extinction. And if cooperation proved impossible, Loki shut down that line of thinking. The Asgard were ethical beings. They would not compromise their principles, even for survival. Would they? As Coruscant's artificial day cycle began, painting the endless city in shades of amber and gold, SG-1 prepared for the Senate presentation. They donned clean uniforms, checked their weapons, holstered but present, and reviewed their talking points one final time. Remember, Daniel said as they assembled in the temple's transport hall, we're asking them to trust us with their genetic material while we're offering technology that could change the balance of their war. That's a lot to ask of people who've been fighting for 3 years and have no reason to trust strangers. We tell the truth, O'Neill said simply. We're honest about what we need and what we're offering. We let them make an informed choice. That's all we can do. And if they refuse? Carter asked. Then we respect that decision and look for alternatives. We're not the Goa'uld. We don't take what we want by force. Yoda arrived to escort them, accompanied by Mace Windu and a security detail. The ancient Jedi Master looked tired, as if he'd spent the night in contemplation of troubling visions. Ready, are you? Yoda asked. As will ever be, O'Neill confirmed. Then to the Senate, we go. And may the Force be with you, even if flow through you directly, it does not. The Jedi Council's private transport lifted off from the temple's hangar, carrying SG-1 toward the Senate building in a confrontation with galactic politics that would determine whether the Asgard found hope or whether Earth's team would need to find another path through this increasingly complex galaxy. The Galactic Senate chamber was a monument to democracy on a scale that defied human comprehension. The central podium floated in the middle of a vast spherical space, surrounded by over 1,000 repulsor-lifted platforms, each carrying delegates from member worlds. The architecture was designed to inspire awe and humility, every senator literally and figuratively equal in their suspended positions, orbiting the center of power like planets around a star. SG-1 stood on the Chancellor's podium as it descended into the chamber's heart, and even O'Neill, who had faced Goa'uld system lords without flinching, felt the weight of 1,000 alien gazes focused on him. The noise was tremendous, hundreds of conversations in dozens of languages, amplified by the chamber's acoustics into a roar that reminded him of standing inside a jet engine. Supreme Chancellor Palpatine stood beside them, his grandfatherly features arranged in an expression of benevolent interest. He wore robes of deep crimson that seemed to absorb light, and his voice, when he spoke, carried an authority that brought instant silence to the chamber. Distinguished senators, Palpatine began, his words echoing through the vast space. We are gathered to hear from remarkable visitors who have traveled farther than any being in our recorded history. From beyond the galactic rim, across the intergalactic void, they come bearing proposals that may reshape our understanding of what is possible. I present Colonel Jack O'Neill and his team, representatives of the Intergalactic Alliance. The podium rotated slowly, giving SG-1 a 360-degree view of the assembled senators. Carter identified species from their database scans: Teal'c, Rhodians, Wookiees, dozens of humanoid and non-humanoid forms. Each platform bore the insignia of worlds she'd never heard of, civilizations with histories that predated human evolution. Daniel stepped forward, and O'Neill noted with approval that his friend showed no visible nervousness despite addressing what amounted to a galactic United Nations. Honorable Senators, Daniel began, his voice amplified by the podium systems, we come before you not as conquerors or competitors, but as explorers seeking mutual benefit through honest cooperation. The people we represent, the Asgard, are facing an existential crisis that threatens their continued survival. A holographic display materialized above the podium, showing the Asgard genome in its degraded state. Carter had prepared the visualization carefully, translating Asgard genetic notation into terms that Republic scientists would recognize. The Asgard are an ancient species, Carter continued, taking over the technical explanation. For millennia, they've relied on cloning to reproduce, but accumulated genetic damage has created a cascade failure in their DNA. Each generation is weaker than the last. Without intervention, they face extinction within our lifetimes. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. On one platform, a Kaminoan senator, tall, elegant, with gray skin and black eyes, leaned forward with unmistakable interest. Your galaxy, Daniel resumed, represents something extraordinary, a concentration of genetic diversity unprecedented in our experience. Thousands of humanoid species, each with unique evolutionary adaptations, each potentially holding pieces of the solution the Asgard need. We're not asking for charity. We're proposing an exchange, genetic samples, willingly given with full informed consent, in return for access to Asgard technology that could benefit your medical research, your defensive capabilities, and your scientific advancement. Senator Bail Organa's platform drifted closer to the center. The Alderaanian senator was exactly as Obi-Wan had described, dignified, thoughtful, radiating the kind of moral authority that came from genuine principle rather than political calculation. "A compelling presentation," Organa said, his voice measured. "But you're asking us to provide biological material to a species we've just met, for purposes we can't verify, in exchange for technology that could destabilize the existing balance of power. How do we know your Asgard friends won't weaponize our genetic information? How do we know they'll honor the consent you promise? And how do we know this isn't simply an elaborate cover for espionage?" "Valid concerns," O'Neill said, stepping forward. "Which is why we're proposing full transparency. Let your scientists examine the Asgard research. Let your ethicists establish the protocols for sample collection. Let your security forces monitor every step of the process. We're not asking for blind trust, we're offering verifiable cooperation." "And what of the technology exchange?" This came from a Mun senator, his elongated head tilting with calculated interest. "You speak of sharing advanced capabilities. Specifically, what are we discussing?" Carter pulled up new holographics, schematics carefully edited to show capabilities without revealing underlying principles. "Transport technology capable of instantaneous matter transmission across planetary distances. Shield generators with efficiency rates exceeding your current systems by factors of 10. Medical scanners that can detect cellular abnormalities at the molecular level. Weapons with variable yield settings and precision targeting. The Asgard are willing to share fabrication techniques and operational principles in exchange for cooperation on the genetic research." The chamber erupted into overlapping conversations. Some senators saw opportunity. Others saw threat. A few platforms had already begun broadcasting to their home governments, seeking instructions. Palpatine allowed the chaos to continue for precisely 30 seconds before raising his hand for silence. "Senator Organa's concerns are well-founded. Perhaps our visitors could address the question of oversight. Who would monitor this genetic collection? Who would ensure ethical compliance? We propose a joint commission," Daniel answered immediately. "Republic representatives, Jedi observers, independent ethicists from neutral worlds, and our own team working together. Any genetic samples would require documented consent from the donor, medical screening to ensure the process causes no harm, and full disclosure of how the material will be used. The Jedi Council supports this framework." Mace Windu's voice came from the Jedi observation platform. "We've examined these visitors through the Force and found no deception in their stated intentions. They are what they claim to be. Diplomatic representatives of a species facing extinction, seeking help through legitimate channels. Though the Force does not touch them directly," a Chagrian senator noted suspiciously. "How do we explain that? What kind of beings exist outside the Force?" "Beings from another galaxy," Yoda's distinctive voice answered. "Where different laws of nature, perhaps they have. Strange this makes them, not evil. Judge them by their actions, we should, not by their connection to the Force." Teal'c stepped forward, and O'Neill saw several senators react to the Jaffa's imposing presence, the gold emblem on his forehead, the staff weapon slung across his back, the bearing of a warrior who had seen more combat than most of them could imagine. "I was born into slavery," Teal'c said, his deep voice carrying easily through the chamber. "I served false gods who claimed divine right to rule over all they surveyed. They took what they wanted, enslaved whom they chose, and justified their actions with power and deception. I know what exploitation looks like, honorable senators. This is not that." He gestured to his teammates. "These humans freed me from bondage. They fight a war against impossible odds to liberate those still enslaved by the Goa'uld. They have risked their lives countless times not for conquest or profit, but because they believe freedom is the birthright of all sentient beings. When they say they seek cooperation based on consent, I believe them. Because I have seen them refuse easier paths when those paths would compromise their principles." The chamber fell silent. Teal'c's testimony carried the weight of lived experience, of moral authority earned through suffering and choice. Then Senator Teal'c of Mon Calamari spoke, his amphibious features creased with concern. Even accepting their good intentions, we must consider the practical implications. The Separatists would be extremely interested in acquiring this technology. If we begin working with these visitors, we create a target. Count Dooku would not hesitate to attack Republic facilities to obtain Asgard technology. Which is why we're prepared to provide defensive support, O'Neill said. The Asgard ship currently in orbit could defend against significant military threats. We're not asking you to face increased danger without protection. One ship, a Neimoidian senator scoffed. Against the Separatist fleet? Presumptuous. Carter smiled, and it wasn't her diplomatic smile. It was her, "You have no idea what you're dealing with," smile. Senator, the Beliskner could disable every ship in your orbital defense grid without breaking cloak. I'm not making a threat, I'm establishing context. Asgard technology represents a significant tactical advantage. Sharing it with the Republic would strengthen your defensive capabilities considerably. Palpatine watched the exchange with an expression of grandfatherly concern, but O'Neill noticed something in the Chancellor's eyes. A calculation happening behind the benevolent facade, pieces moving on a board only he could see. Perhaps a demonstration would alleviate concerns, Palpatine suggested smoothly. If the Asgard vessel were to display its capabilities in a controlled environment, the Senate could better assess the value of what's being offered. We'd be willing to arrange that, O'Neill said carefully. Though we'd prefer to keep the demonstration defensive in nature. We're not here to intimidate anyone. Of course not, Palpatine agreed. Simply a technical display. Senator Organa, would Alderaan be willing to host such a demonstration? Your planetary defense force could provide a suitable scenario. Organa considered carefully. We would need assurances that this demonstration poses no risk to Alderaanian civilians or infrastructure. But yes, if properly structured, Alderaan could facilitate an evaluation. The Chancellor nodded with satisfaction. Excellent. Then I propose we table the full vote on cooperation until after this demonstration. It will give senators time to consult with their governments and allow our visitors to prove their capabilities. All in favor? The vote was overwhelming. The Senate wanted more information before committing to anything. As the session concluded and platforms began ascending back to their docking positions, O'Neill gathered his team. Well, that went about as expected. They want proof before they buy. The demonstration concerns me, Carter said quietly. If we show too much, we make ourselves a target. If we show too little, they won't take us seriously. And Palpatine's suggestion wasn't random, Daniel added. He maneuvered that vote like a chess master. I get the feeling he's playing a deeper game than we're seeing. Before they could discuss further, the Kaminoan senator approached their platform, moving with the fluid grace characteristic of her species. I am Senator Halle Bertoni of Kamino. Your presentation was fascinating. The Asgard cloning crisis shares certain characteristics with challenges my people have studied. I would like to arrange a private meeting to discuss technical details. We'd welcome that, Carter said. Though we should coordinate through official channels. Of course, Bertoni interrupted smoothly. But understand, Colonel O'Neill, that Kamino's cloning expertise is not freely shared. If you want our help with the Asgard problem, you'll need to offer something of equivalent value. And you'll need to navigate Republic military contracts that give the Grand Army priority access to our facilities. We understand the complexity, O'Neill assured her. We're prepared for lengthy negotiations. Bertoni's black eyes studied him with an intensity that felt almost predatory. Are you? Because in my experience, desperation makes beings impatient. And your Asgard friends are very desperate indeed. She glided away before O'Neill could respond, leaving SG-1 alone on the descending podium. She's not wrong, Carter said quietly. The Asgard don't have the luxury of time. If negotiations drag on too long, then we find alternatives, O'Neill said firmly. But we don't compromise our ethics because someone's holding a clock over our heads. That's how good people end up doing bad things. The Jedi escort returned to guide them back to the temple, but as they crossed the Senate Plaza, Teal'c suddenly stopped, his warrior instincts flaring. "We are being followed." O'Neill's hand moved casually toward his holstered sidearm. "How many?" "At least 3 individuals maintaining consistent distance. Professional surveillance." "Could be Senate security," Carter suggested. "Could be," O'Neill agreed. "Or could be someone with less official interest in our activities." Everyone stay alert. They continued toward the waiting transport, and O'Neill caught glimpses of their shadows, figures that melted into crowds with practiced ease, technology that bent light around them to create partial invisibility. Whoever was tracking them had resources and training. Back aboard the Beliskner, Thor reviewed the Senate sessions recordings with growing concern. The political landscape was more complex than anticipated, and certain elements, particularly Chancellor Palpatine, triggered analytical warnings that the Asgard couldn't quite explain. There was something about the man's biosignature, subtle anomalies in his energy patterns that didn't match the baseline for his species. "Colonel O'Neill," Thor said when SG-1 returned to the ship, "I must report troubling findings. My analysis of the Clone Wars reveals statistical impossibilities in the conflict's progression. Both sides receive intelligence at precisely the right moments to prevent decisive victories. Resources are allocated with suspicious efficiency to prolong rather than conclude the fighting. And Chancellor Palpatine's emergency powers have expanded in direct correlation with battlefield setbacks." "You're saying the war might be orchestrated," Daniel said, his expression grim. "I am saying the patterns suggest coordination beyond what random conflict would produce. Whether that coordination is deliberate manipulation or simply effective crisis management, I cannot determine from available data." O'Neill paced the command center, thinking through implications. "If the war is being manipulated, and we introduce advanced technology into this mess, we could be handing weapons to whoever's pulling the strings. Which is why the demonstration matters," Carter said. "We control the narrative, show exactly what we want them to see, and use it to gauge reactions. Who gets excited about defensive shields versus offensive weapons tells us something about their priorities. And we watch Palpatine," O'Neill decided. "Carefully. Because if Thor's right and this whole war is somebody's game, then the Chancellor sitting at the center of Republic power is either the puppet master or the world's luckiest politician." In the Senate building's deepest levels, in chambers that officially didn't exist, Palpatine, Darth Sidious, reviewed recordings of SG-1's presentation with cold satisfaction. The Asgard technology was even more advanced than initial reports suggested. Beaming technology could bypass shields. Medical scanners could detect Sith deception. Transport capabilities could render planetary defenses obsolete. All of it could be turned to his purposes. All of it could accelerate the grand design. But these visitors were wild cards, unpredictable elements in a plan that had been calibrated over decades. They needed to be controlled, directed, or eliminated. Sidious reached out through the Force, touching the minds of his various agents scattered across Coruscant. Count Dooku received his instructions: make contact with SG-1, offer the Separatist perspective, plant seeds of doubt about Republic intentions. Cad Bane received his contract: acquire samples of their technology, preferably without killing the visitors, but success was the priority. And deep in the industrial districts, in facilities that produced the clone army, certain Kaminoan scientists received encrypted messages about an opportunity that could advance their research beyond anything the Republic contract offered. The game was accelerating. And Darth Sidious, who had spent a lifetime turning chaos into stepping stones toward ultimate power, began positioning his pieces for the next phase. SG-1 had come seeking genetic salvation for a dying race. What they'd found was a galaxy on the edge of transformation, where their presence might tip the balance toward light or darkness, and they had no way of knowing which. The demonstration above Alderaan was scheduled for 3 days hence, which gave SG-1 time to explore Coruscant under Jedi supervision and, more importantly, to be approached by every faction with an interest in extragalactic technology. The first to make contact was Count Dooku, and he did so with the elegant directness of someone who believed diplomacy was simply another form of combat. The message arrived through official Separatist diplomatic channels. A request for dialogue, transmitted under flag of truce, proposing a meeting at a neutral location in Coruscant's lower levels. The Jedi Council was predictably opposed. A trap, it could be, Yoda warned, his ears flat against his head. Trust Count Dooku, we cannot. Once a Jedi, now a Sith. Dangerous, he is. Which is exactly why we should hear what he has to say, O'Neill countered. They were gathered in the council chamber again, the morning light streaming through tall windows to illuminate the circular room. If the Separatists are going to make a play for us, I'd rather know their offer up front than have them work behind the scenes. The Colonel has a point, Obi-Wan said reluctantly. Dooku is many things, but he's not subtle. If he wants to make an offer, he'll do so directly. And refusing to meet could be interpreted as choosing sides. Mace Windu's expression remained skeptical. You're walking into a conversation with a Sith Lord. They manipulate, deceive, and corrupt. His words will sound reasonable, but they'll be designed to create doubt and discord. Then it's a good thing we've had practice dealing with manipulative parasites who claim godhood, O'Neill said. The Goa'uld wrote the book on manipulation. At least this Dooku guy isn't pretending to be R.A. I will accompany you, Anakin Skywalker said suddenly. The young Jedi Knight had been standing near the window, and his intervention surprised the council. Dooku was my master's master. I've faced him in combat. If this is a trap, you'll need someone who knows how he fights. Skywalker, your history with Dooku, Mace began. Is exactly why I should go, Anakin interrupted, and O'Neill recognized the stubborn determination in his voice. It was the same tone Daniel used when he decided something was right regardless of what anyone else thought. I won't let personal feelings compromise the mission. But SG-1 doesn't know what they're dealing with. I do. Yoda studied Anakin with those ancient, knowing eyes. Agree, I do. But cautious, you must be, young Skywalker. The dark side clouds everything. See clearly, difficult it becomes. The meeting location was a cafe in level 3204, low enough to avoid the gleaming upper city politics, high enough to avoid the genuine danger of Coruscant's underworld. The establishment catered to beings seeking privacy, with sound-dampening booths and a proprietor whose survival depended on discretion. Count Dooku sat alone in the largest booth, a cup of Alderaanian tea steaming before him. He wore civilian clothes, expensive, understated, the attire of cultured aristocracy rather than military leadership. When SG-1 approached with Anakin, Dooku's expression registered genuine interest rather than hostility. Colonel O'Neill, Dooku rose with courtly grace, offering a slight bow. Dr. Jackson. Major Carter. Teal'c. And young Skywalker, still nursing that mechanical hand I gave you, I see. Anakin's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. O'Neill gestured for his team to sit, positioning himself with clear lines of sight to exits while Carter's hand rested casually near her Zat gun. Count Dooku, O'Neill said. Appreciate you not immediately trying to kill us. Sets a nice tone for diplomacy. Dooku smiled without warmth. I prefer civilized discourse to violence, Colonel. Unlike the Jedi, I don't believe that every conflict must be resolved through aggressive negotiations. His eyes flicked to Anakin. The Separatist Alliance is very interested in your proposal to the Senate. In fact, we believe we can offer something the Republic cannot. Which is? Daniel asked, already taking mental notes. Honesty about our intentions, Dooku said simply. The Republic will smile and negotiate while their intelligence services analyze ways to exploit your technology for military advantage. Chancellor Palpatine will speak of mutual benefit while calculating how to leverage your Asgard friend's desperation. But the Separatist alliance will be direct. We want access to your technology, and we're willing to pay for it. With genetic samples? Carter asked. With genetic samples, with scientific cooperation, with whatever resources you require, Dooku confirmed. The Confederacy of Independent Systems includes some of the galaxy's most advanced research institutions. The Techno-Union, the Banking Clan, the Geonosian bioengineering facilities, all would be made available for your Asgard colleagues' research. In exchange for weapons, Teal'c stated flatly. In exchange for survival, Dooku corrected. The Republic has grown complacent, corrupt, inefficient. The Separatist movement began as a legitimate protest against taxation without representation, against centralized power that ignored the needs of Outer Rim worlds. Now we fight for the right to self-determination. With a droid army numbering in the trillions, Anakin said coldly. How's that working out for self-determination, Count? Better than clone slavery, Dooku shot back. At least our soldiers are machines, built for purpose, not sentient beings bred to die in Republic wars. But that's not why I asked for this meeting. I want you to understand that the choice you're being offered is false. The Jedi present themselves as moral authorities, but they've become generals in a war they don't understand. The Republic's Senate is paralyzed by bureaucracy and controlled by a chancellor who's accumulated more power than any single being should possess. Daniel leaned forward. And the Separatist alliance is different how? You're backed by corporate interests who profit from the war. Your leadership includes beings who've committed documented atrocities. You're not exactly presenting a moral high ground here. I'm not claiming moral superiority, Dooku said, and for a moment something like genuine frustration crossed his elegant features. I'm claiming transparency. Work with the Separatists, and you'll know exactly what you're getting. Work with the Republic, and you'll discover too late that you've been maneuvered into supporting something far darker than you realized. O'Neill had been watching Dooku carefully throughout the conversation, looking for the tells he'd learned to recognize in manipulative opponents. But the Count's body language suggested something more complex than simple deception. There was belief here, conviction, possibly even elements of truth wrapped in whatever larger agenda he served. Let's say we believe you're being honest about the Republic's flaws, O'Neill said. What's your actual offer? Specifics. Dooku pulled out a data chip and slid it across the table. Full access to Separatist research facilities. Genetic samples from over 500 member species, all documented and catalogued. Technical specifications for our most advanced cloning technology, including work that exceeds what the Kaminoans have shared with the Republic. And protection, the Confederacy Navy would ensure no interference with your research. In exchange for? Carter asked, though she already knew. Shield technology. Beaming capabilities. Your advanced sensors and targeting systems. And one other thing, neutrality. Don't provide the same technology to the Republic. Let the playing field tip in our favor, and when the Separatist alliance wins, we'll remember those who helped us achieve independence. And if we refuse? O'Neill asked. Dooku's expression hardened slightly. Then you'll discover that the galaxy is more dangerous than the Jedi have led you to believe. There are forces at work here that you don't understand, Colonel. Ancient powers that manipulate both sides of this conflict for purposes beyond your comprehension. The Jedi sense this but refuse to acknowledge it. I, at least, am willing to name the darkness openly. Anakin stood abruptly, his hand moving toward his lightsaber. Enough. You're trying to turn them against the Republic with half-truths and conspiracy theories. Am I? Dooku rose as well, matching Anakin's intensity. Tell me, Skywalker, has the Council shared with you their doubts about Palpatine? Have they mentioned their concerns about how conveniently the war serves to concentrate power in his hands? Or do they keep you in the dark while sending you to fight their battles? The temperature in the booth seemed to drop. O'Neill stood, placing himself between Anakin and Dooku before the situation escalated into violence. "We appreciate the offer, Count," O'Neill said firmly. "We'll consider it along with the Republic's proposal. But understand, we're not picking sides in your civil war. We're here for one reason, to help the Asgard survive. Whatever deal we make, it'll be based on who can actually deliver what we need ethically and effectively." "Then I hope you choose wisely," Dooku said. "Because the consequences of choosing wrong in this galaxy are terminal." He nodded to Anakin. "Give my regards to Kenobi. Tell him his old master sends his best." Dooku departed with aristocratic grace, leaving SG-1 and Anakin in the sound-dampened booth. Carter immediately pulled out her scanner, running electromagnetic spectrum analysis on the data chip. "It's clean," she confirmed. "No tracking devices, no embedded malware that I can detect. Just data, exactly what he claimed." "Which doesn't mean we should trust it," Anakin said, his anger still simmering. "Dooku is a Sith. They lie like normal beings breathe." "Maybe," Daniel said thoughtfully. "But some of what he said rang true. The Republic does have problems. The Chancellor has accumulated extraordinary power. And the clone army is ethically problematic regardless of how necessary it might be militarily." "You're not seriously considering his offer?" Anakin demanded. "We're considering all our options," O'Neill said carefully. "That's what diplomatic negotiations mean." "But Anakin, he's right about one thing, there are elements of this conflict we don't understand. The Jedi have concerns about Palpatine. The war has been going on for 3 years with no resolution in sight. Somebody's benefiting from this mess, and we need to figure out who before we hand over technology that could change everything." They returned to the temple through Coruscant's crowded skylanes, each member of SG-1 processing the conversation differently. Carter analyzed the technical data Dooku had provided. The Separatist research capabilities were impressive, possibly more advanced than Republic facilities in certain areas. Daniel considered the political implications, the way Dooku had planted doubt without making obviously false claims. Teal'c remained silent, but O'Neill recognized his friend's contemplative expression. The Jaffa was drawing parallels to the Goa'ulds' manipulation tactics. And O'Neill thought about the bigger picture. In their galaxy, the Goa'uld were obvious enemies, parasitic slavers who claimed divinity. But here, the lines were blurred. Both sides claimed legitimate grievances. Both sides had committed atrocities. And somewhere in the middle, billions of beings just wanted the war to end so they could live their lives. The Beliskner detected the approach before anyone else, a small craft, unmarked, requesting permission to dock. Thor ran identification protocols and found nothing in Republic or Separatist databases. "Colonel, we have an unscheduled visitor," Thor announced. "The pilot identifies himself as a concerned citizen with information about your situation. He's unarmed and alone." "Probably a trap," O'Neill muttered, but his curiosity was piqued. "Beam him to a secure area. Let's see what this concerned citizen wants." The visitor materialized in the Beliskner's conference room, a slim human male in nondescript clothing, perhaps 40 standard years old, with the cautious eyes of someone who'd spent a lifetime looking over his shoulder. He studied the Asgard technology around him with professional interest before focusing on SG-1. "My name is Galen Erso," he said. "I'm a research scientist, currently employed by the Republic but with complicated loyalties. I've been following your Senate presentation and your meeting with Count Dooku. I have information you need to hear, but first I need assurances that what I tell you won't be traced back to me." "Why should we trust you?" Carter asked. "Because I'm risking everything to be here," Galen said simply. "I've seen what happens to beings with advanced technology in this galaxy. They become weapons, whether they want to or not. And I've learned things about this war, about the forces manipulating both sides, that terrify me. You seem like decent people trying to help a dying species. I'd prefer you didn't become pawns in someone else's game." O'Neill exchanged glances with his team. Daniel gave a slight nod, his instinct said the man was genuine. Carter's tactical assessment suggested the risk was manageable. Teal'c's expression remained neutral, but he hadn't raised any objections. "All right, Mr. Urso," O'Neill said. "We're listening. What do you know that we need to hear?" Galen took a deep breath. "The war isn't what it appears to be. The Separatist leadership, Count Dooku, the corporate council, they answer to someone. A Sith Lord called Darth Sidious. But here's the part that should terrify you, the Republic is also compromised. I don't have proof, just patterns, connections, intelligence that doesn't add up unless someone is playing both sides against each other." "You're saying the war is orchestrated?" Daniel asked, though Thor's analysis had already suggested as much. "I'm saying the war serves someone's purpose," Galen clarified. "And that someone has resources, patience, and a plan that spans decades. If you introduce Asgard technology into this conflict, you won't be helping the Republic or the Separatists. You'll be arming whoever's pulling the strings. Do you have evidence?" Carter pressed. "Fragments. Encrypted communications that shouldn't exist. Research projects funded through channels that make no sense. Orders that originate from sources that can't be traced. Nothing definitive, nothing I could take to the Senate or the Jedi Council. But enough to make me very, very careful about who I trust." O'Neill studied the scientist. "Why come to us? Why not take this to someone with actual authority?" "Because everyone with authority is already part of the system," Galen said. "The Jedi are compromised by their role as generals. The Senate is paralyzed by politics. And Chancellor Palpatine." He trailed off, then shook his head. "You're outsiders. You don't have decades of galactic politics clouding your judgment. Maybe you can see what those of us trapped in the system have missed. Or maybe you're here to manipulate us for whatever side you really serve," Teal'c observed quietly. "That's possible," Galen admitted. "You'll have to decide whether to trust me. But I'll give you this for free, be very careful at your demonstration above Alderaan. Someone is going to make a move. I don't know who or how, but tensions are too high, stakes are too significant. Expect something to go wrong." He stood, preparing to leave. "One more thing. The Kaminoans, Senator Bertoni specifically, she's more connected to military intelligence than she appears. Whatever deal she offers, assume multiple parties are listening in. And watch Chancellor Palpatine. There's something about him that doesn't add up. The Jedi sense it but can't quite identify it. Maybe your Asgard sensors can." Galen departed as mysteriously as he'd arrived, leaving SG-1 with more questions than answers. O'Neill contacted Thor immediately. "That scan you ran on Palpatine's biosignature, the anomalies you detected. Can you analyze them more thoroughly?" "I will attempt to do so, Colonel," Thor replied. "However, without direct access to the Chancellor, my analysis will be limited to remote sensor data, which is imperfect at best." "Do what you can," O'Neill said. "Because we're walking into something here, and I get the feeling we're about 3 steps behind whoever's actually running this show." In the Senate building, in chambers layered with Sith sorcery that made them invisible to Force-sensitive perception, Darth Sidious reviewed reports on SG-1's activities with cold satisfaction. They'd met with Dooku as expected. They'd received Galen Urso's warnings, also as planned. After all, Sidious had ensured certain documents would be accessible to the scientist, had allowed specific communications to be traced just far enough to create the pattern of conspiracy Urso had discovered. Everything was proceeding exactly as foreseen. SG-1 would attend the demonstration, something would indeed go wrong, and in the chaos that followed, they would be forced to choose sides. And regardless of which side they chose, Darth Sidious would benefit. The Asgard technology would be his. The genetic research would serve his purposes. And these visitors from beyond the rim would become either weapons in his arsenal or cautionary examples of what happened to those who interfered with the Sith's grand design. The game was entering its most delicate phase. But Darth Sidious, who had orchestrated the Clone Wars across 3 years and 1,000 systems, felt no doubt. He had spent a lifetime turning chaos into order, weakness into strength, hope into despair. For soldiers from another galaxy would be no different. Mandalore had been reborn from the ashes of its warrior past into something the galaxy didn't quite know how to categorize, a neutral system that maintained armed neutrality, a pacifist government that tolerated warrior clans, a culture divided between new Mandalorians who preached peace and traditionalists who believed that strength through combat was the Mandalorian way. It was this complicated balance that made Duchess Satine Kryze's invitation both surprising and strategically sound. The message arrived directly to the Beliskner, bypassing Senate channels entirely, Colonel O'Neill and SG-1. The Mandalorian government extends an invitation to visit our system before your demonstration above Alderaan. We believe we can offer something neither the Republic nor Separatists can provide, genuine neutrality and access to genetic diversity without the complications of choosing sides in the Clone Wars. Duchess Satine Kryze. It's smart, Daniel said, studying the transmission's metadata. Mandalore is officially neutral, recognized by both the Republic and Separatists. If we negotiate with them, we're not perceived as favoring either side. And they've got multiple clans with distinct genetic lineages, all humanoid, all potentially useful for Asgard research. Plus they're warriors, O'Neill added. The kind who respect strength and direct dealing. Might be easier to negotiate with than politicians who spend 3 hours saying nothing. The Mandalorians have a complicated history, Obi-Wan warned when SG-1 consulted the Jedi Council. The warrior clans, Death Watch and others, don't recognize Duchess Satine's authority. They believe she's betrayed Mandalorian culture by embracing pacifism. If you visit Mandalore, you may find yourself caught between competing visions of what their people should be. Story of our lives, O'Neill said. We'll take our chances. The Beliskner dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Mandalore system, and even Carter, who'd seen the technological wonders of Coruscant, found herself impressed. The planet below had been devastated by centuries of warfare, its surface scorched by nuclear fire and biological weapons, transformed into desert wasteland. But the Mandalorians had adapted, building sealed dome cities that gleamed like jewels against the barren landscape. Impressive, Thor observed. They've sustained advanced civilization on a planet that should be uninhabitable. Their environmental technology and resource management exceed many more populous systems. Mandalorians are survivors, a new voice said over the comm channel. We've had to be. The speaker identified herself as Bo-Katan Kryze, sister to the Duchess and commander of Mandalore's defense forces. Her holographic image showed a woman in partial Mandalorian armor. The distinctive T-visor helmet was absent, revealing sharp features and eyes that assessed SG-1 with military precision. You'll land at Sundari, the capital, Bo-Katan instructed. The Duchess will receive you formally, but afterward, I'd like to speak with you separately. The warrior clans have questions about your technology and your purpose here. Fair enough, O'Neill agreed. We're happy to talk to anyone interested in honest negotiation. Sundari was a city of white architecture and geometric precision, built to maximize efficiency in a hostile environment. The population moved with purpose through streets designed for function rather than aesthetics. SG-1 noticed immediately that while most citizens wore civilian clothing, a significant minority bore armor, not the ornate plates of ceremonial guards, but practical, worn gear that spoke of real combat experience. Duchess Satine received them in the throne room of the royal palace, a chamber that balanced elegance with the stark efficiency characteristic of Mandalorian design. She was younger than O'Neill expected, perhaps 40 standard years, with blonde hair styled in an elaborate arrangement and eyes that carried both compassion and steel resolve. Welcome to Mandalore, Satine said, her voice carrying the cultured accent of diplomatic training overlaid on something harder. I followed your Senate presentation with great interest. The Republic and Separatists will both try to use you for their military advantage. We offer an alternative. Cooperation without political entanglement. Your Highness, Daniel began, slipping naturally into diplomatic mode, we appreciate the invitation. Can you explain what Mandalore could offer that the Republic cannot? Autonomy, Satine said simply. The Republic would bury you in bureaucratic oversight, senatorial committees, and military intelligence reviews. The Separatists would demand exclusive access to your technology. But Mandalore is neutral. We have no stake in the Clone Wars beyond protecting our own sovereignty. We can facilitate genetic research without the complications of choosing sides. Carter leaned forward. What genetic resources are we discussing specifically? Mandalorian culture spans hundreds of systems, Satine explained. Many clans maintain distinct genetic lineages dating back millennia. We have access to diverse humanoid genetics without the political complications of the Republic's member worlds. Additionally, our medical technology, particularly in cybernetics and regeneration, is among the galaxy's most advanced. A necessity when your culture historically resolved disputes through combat. You say, historically, Teal'c observed. Yet I see many warriors in your streets wearing armor. Satine's expression tightened slightly. Mandalore is in transition. I believe our warrior past led us to near extinction, the Excision Wars reduced our planet to wasteland. I've worked to build a peaceful society. But many Mandalorians, particularly the traditionalist clans, believe I've betrayed our heritage. They maintain the old ways, combat training, armor, the belief that strength defines worth. And these traditionalists, O'Neill asked carefully, how do they feel about your government negotiating with outsiders? That's a question better answered by the traditionalists themselves, a new voice said from the chamber's entrance. The speaker was a woman in full Mandalorian armor, blue and gray plates, dual blaster pistols, and the distinctive T-visor helmet tucked under one arm. Bo-Katan moved with the confident stride of a lifelong warrior, and SG-1 recognized the type immediately, a soldier who'd seen real combat, who commanded through competence rather than rank. My sister leads the new Mandalorians, Bo-Katan said. I speak for those who remember what we were and question what we've become. She turned to SG-1. The warrior clans are interested in your proposal, but we have different priorities than the Duchess. We want to understand your combat capabilities, your weapons technology, and whether your Asgard friends are truly as advanced as claimed. Bo-Katan, Satine's voice carried warning. We discussed this. They're here for genetic research, not military consultation. And yet they came armed, Bo-Katan noted, gesturing to the weapons SG-1 carried. They're soldiers, sister. They understand that in this galaxy, even peaceful intentions require the capability for violence. I respect that more than pretending we can negotiate from weakness. The tension between the sisters was palpable, representing the broader conflict within Mandalorian culture. O'Neill decided to address both directly. We're soldiers, he confirmed. We fight when necessary to protect Earth and our allies. But we also negotiate, explore, and seek peaceful solutions when possible. We're not interested in fueling Mandalore's internal conflicts. We're here to see if you can help the Asgard and whether mutual cooperation makes sense for everyone involved. Then let's speak practically, Bo-Katan said. The warrior clans control significant territory outside Sindari's jurisdiction. We have extensive genetic diversity, combat-tested medical technology, and the resources to support research without Senate oversight. But we're not pacifists. If we provide genetic samples, we expect technology in return, specifically, weapons and defensive systems that could help us resist Republic or Separatist interference. You want arms, Satine said coldly. You want to use these visitors to strengthen Death Watch and the other radical clans. I want to ensure Mandalore can defend itself, Bo-Katan corrected. Your pacifism works until someone with guns decides to ignore your diplomatic protests. Then what? We rely on Republic protection. Beg the Separatists for mercy. We rely on civilization, Satine insisted. On the rule of law, on diplomatic solutions, on being better than our violent past. Noble sentiments, Teal'c said quietly, and both sisters turned to him. I once believed that superior firepower justified my master's right to rule. Then I learned that true strength comes not from weapons, but from the courage to fight only when all other options are exhausted. However, he paused, letting the weight of experience fill his words, that courage means nothing if you lack the capability to fight when it becomes necessary. Peace through weakness is not peace. It is merely waiting to be conquered. The chamber fell silent. Teal'c's words carried the authority of someone who'd lived both philosophies and understood their costs. Daniel broke the silence. Perhaps we're approaching this wrong. Instead of choosing between the Duchess's vision and the warrior clan's priorities, what if we structured cooperation that serves both? Genetic research coordinated through official government channels, technology exchange that focuses on defensive capabilities rather than offensive weapons, and transparent protocols that give both new Mandalorians and traditionalists oversight. A compromise, Satine said, though her tone suggested skepticism about whether such balance could be maintained. More like acknowledging reality, O'Neill said. You've got internal divisions that predate our arrival and will probably outlast our visit. We're not going to solve Mandalore's identity crisis. But we can structure our cooperation so it doesn't make things worse. Bo-Katan considered this. You'd provide defensive technology. Shields, sensors, transport capabilities. Nothing offensive. The Asgard would need to approve specifics, Carter said. But defensive systems align with their ethical guidelines. They're committed to the Protected Planets Treaty in our galaxy. Essentially, they defend developing civilizations without providing weapons that could be used for conquest. And you trust these Asgard? Bo-Katan asked bluntly. With our lives, O'Neill confirmed. Multiple times over. They're not perfect, but they're ethical. When they say they'll honor an agreement, they do it. Satine and Bo-Katan exchanged a long look, communicating in the way siblings do after years of argument and compromise. Finally, Satine nodded. Very well. Very well. Mandalore will formally propose a genetic research partnership. We'll provide access to multiple clan lineages through voluntary participation, coordinate through medical facilities in both Sundari and traditional clan territories, and establish oversight committees that include representatives from all Mandalorian factions. In return, Bo-Katan added, you provide defensive technology specifications, training on implementation, and protection during the research phase if either Republic or Separatist forces attempt interference. We'll need to coordinate with Thor, O'Neill said. But that framework sounds workable. The negotiation continued for hours, hammering out details. Which clans would participate, how consent would be documented, what medical safeguards would prevent exploitation, how technology transfer would be staged to ensure compliance from both sides. Daniel took point on the ethical framework, Carter on technical specifications, while Teal'c and Bo-Katan found common ground discussing defensive tactics and warrior philosophy. By the time they broke for the evening, SG-1 had the foundation of their first concrete agreement. One that avoided the political complications of choosing sides in the Clone Wars while providing the Asgard with genuine genetic diversity. This is good work, Thor confirmed when they returned to the Beliskner. The Mandalorian genetic profiles show significant diversity without the cloning degradation issues affecting the Republic's army. If they follow through, this could provide substantial progress towards solving our crisis. There's still the demonstration above Alderaan, Carter reminded them. The Senate wants proof of our capabilities before they'll agree to anything. And Galen Erso's warning suggests someone's planning to disrupt it. Which is why we need to be ready for anything, O'Neill said. Thor, what's our tactical situation? The Beliskner is capable of defending against significant military force, Thor replied. However, if multiple capital ships attack simultaneously, or if Separatist forces deploy their more exotic weapons, the situation could become complicated. I recommend positioning additional Asgard vessels in the system as backup. Do it, O'Neill ordered. And run continuous scans for anything unusual, cloaked ships, weapon signatures, unusual energy readings. If someone's planning an ambush, I want to know about it before they spring the trap. That night, in the Beliskner's observation deck, SG-1 gathered to process everything they'd learned. Through the viewport, Mandalore's scarred surface rotated slowly beneath them, a reminder of what warfare could do to a civilization. "We're 3 days into this mission," Daniel said, "and we've already been approached by the Republic, the Separatists, Mandalore, and a mysterious scientist warning us about conspiracies. Anyone else feel like we're missing something big?" "Thor's analysis of the Clone Wars patterns," Carter said. "Galen's warnings about manipulation on both sides. Dooku's hints about ancient powers at work. It all points to something larger than a simple civil war." "The Jedi sense it too," O'Neill added. "Obi-Wan basically told us to be careful around Palpatine. Yoda talks about darkness clouding everything. But they're so embedded in the system, they can't see the full picture. Or they see it and cannot act," Teal'c suggested. "The Jaffa spent centuries serving the Goa'uld, aware on some level that we were slaves, but the system was so complete, so pervasive, that breaking free required external catalyst. Perhaps the Jedi are similarly constrained by their role as Republic servants. Which means we might be that external catalyst," Daniel said quietly. "The outsiders who can see what they can't, who have the freedom to act without being trapped by galactic politics." "That's a hell of a responsibility," O'Neill said. "We came here to help the Asgard collect genetic samples. Now we're potentially uncovering galaxy-wide conspiracies and trying not to tip the balance toward whichever side is actually evil." "Welcome to First Contact," Carter said with a tired smile. "When has it ever been simple?" On Mandalore's surface, in warrior clan territories far from Sundari's pacifist influence, Bo-Katan gathered her most trusted warriors. They'd watched the visitors from another galaxy, assessed their combat capabilities through observation and force-augmented perception reports from Jedi encounters. "They're competent," Bo-Katan reported. "Real soldiers, not politicians playing at war. Their technology is decades ahead of anything in our arsenal. And they've made an offer that gives US leverage without requiring us to bow to my sister's pacifist ideology." "Can we trust them?" one of her lieutenants asked. "More than I trust the Republic or Separatists," Bo-Katan said. "But we watch carefully. And we prepare for the possibility that their demonstration above Alderaan goes very badly. If it does, Mandalore needs to be ready to protect our interests regardless of what happens to these visitors." She looked up at the stars, where the Beliskner hung in orbit, invisible to normal sensors but detectable through Mandalorian military technology that had been refined over millennia of warfare. "Our ancestors conquered star systems through strength and honor," Bo-Katan said quietly. "We nearly destroyed ourselves in the process. Now these outsiders come offering power without fully understanding the wars they're entering. We'll take what they offer, honor our agreements, and ensure that whatever chaos follows, Mandalore survives." In the Senate building on Coruscant, Chancellor Palpatine received reports on SG-1's Mandalore negotiations with carefully concealed irritation. The Mandalorian agreement was clever. It bypassed his control, provided the Asgard with what they needed without requiring Senate approval, and demonstrated to other neutral systems that cooperation with the visitors was possible without choosing sides. But Darth Sidious had not orchestrated the Clone Wars across 3 years to be outmaneuvered by soldiers from another galaxy. The demonstration above Alderaan would proceed. The planned disruption would occur. And in the chaos that followed, SG-1 would learn that neutrality was a luxury this galaxy no longer afforded. The pieces were moving exactly as foreseen. And when they finished moving, the Sith would have everything they needed, the Asgard technology, the genetic research, and the elimination of any potential threats to the grand design. All that remained was to let the trap spring shut. Alderaan hung in space like a jewel. Green continents, blue oceans, white polar caps, the visual representation of a planet that had never known orbital bombardment or planetary warfare. Senator Bail Organa's world was famous throughout the Republic for its commitment to diplomacy, education, and cultural preservation. It was also, as Carter noted while reviewing tactical data, defended by one of the most sophisticated planetary shield networks in the galaxy. "They're not taking chances," she said, studying the sensor readings from the Beliskner's command center. 18 orbital defense platforms, overlapping shield coverage, early warning systems that could detect a fleet dropping out of hyperspace 3 light minutes out. For a peaceful world, they've got serious defensive capabilities. A lesson learned from history, Bail Organa's voice came through the comm channel. The senator had personally coordinated the demonstration, arranging for a decommissioned Republic frigate to serve as the target vessel. Alderaan has remained free precisely because we've never been an easy target. We believe in peace, but we're not naive about the galaxy's dangers. The demonstration fleet assembled in high orbit, the Beliskner, cloaked and hovering at a distance that made most of the assembled observers nervous, the decommissioned frigate Valor, a Consular-class vessel that had served with distinction before structural damage made it uneconomical to repair. And an observation platform where Republic military analysts, Senate representatives, Jedi observers, and invited neutral parties gathered to witness what Asgard technology could accomplish. SG-1 stood on the observation platform alongside Bail Organa, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Anakin Skywalker. The young Jedi Knight had insisted on attending, claiming it was to protect SG-1 but clearly driven by genuine curiosity about technology that surpassed anything he'd encountered. The demonstration will proceed in 3 phases, Carter explained to the assembled observers, her voice broadcast across multiple channels. First, we'll demonstrate Asgard transport technology, beaming capabilities. Second, defensive shields under combat conditions. Third, weapon systems set to minimal yield for safety purposes. And the Beliskner remains cloaked throughout, a Teal'c military analyst asked. Correct, Carter confirmed. Asgard cloaking technology renders the ship invisible to standard sensors while maintaining full operational capability. It's one of the primary defensive systems we're offering in exchange for cooperation on genetic research. O'Neill watched the assembled observers carefully. Most showed professional interest, military personnel assessing capabilities, scientists calculating principles, politicians weighing advantages. But a few displayed something else. The hungry intensity of beings who saw opportunity for exploitation rather than cooperation. Colonel, Thor's voice came through O'Neill's earpiece, private channel, I'm detecting unusual subspace fluctuations at the system's edge. Configuration suggests multiple ships preparing to exit hyperspace, but they're using a masking technique I've not encountered in this galaxy before. How many ships? O'Neill asked quietly, turning away from the crowd. At least 6 capital-class vessels. Possibly more. They're maintaining formation that suggests military coordination rather than merchant traffic. O'Neill caught Carter's eye across the platform and tapped his ear twice, their signal for incoming trouble. She nodded fractionally and shifted position, casually moving closer to Bail Organa while her hand drifted toward her sidearm. Let's begin the demonstration, O'Neill announced, forcing calm into his voice. Thor, initiate Phase 1. The Beliskner dropped its cloak for exactly 3 seconds, long enough for every sensor in the system to register its position, confirm its presence, and capture detailed scans. Then it vanished again, and simultaneously, a Republic officer standing on the Valor's bridge vanished in a column of white light. The officer materialized on the observation platform, eyes wide with shock, still holding the datapad he'd been studying. The crowd erupted in excited chatter. Transport achieved across approximately 12,000 kilometers, Carter narrated. Molecular deconstruction and reconstruction with zero loss of information. The process can be used for personnel, equipment, or medical evacuation. And it's instantaneous within planetary orbital ranges. Extraordinary, Bail Organa breathed. The medical applications alone, evacuating injured soldiers directly from battlefields, bypassing blockades to deliver supplies, or extracting hostages from hostile situations, Obi-Wan added thoughtfully. Inserting strike teams without warning. This technology fundamentally changes tactical equations. Phase 2, O'Neill announced, trying to project confidence while Thor's warnings echoed in his mind. Shield demonstration. The Beliskner uncloaked again, this time maintaining visibility as its shields activated. The Asgard ship's defensive screens appeared as faint distortions in space, barely visible until the Valor opened fire with its remaining functional turbolasers. Green energy bolts lanced across the void, striking the Beliskner's shields with spectacular impact. The defensive screens absorbed the fire without visible strain, dissipating terawatts of energy across their surface with casual efficiency. Shield integrity at 98%, Carter reported. Asgard shields can sustain fire from multiple capital ships indefinitely while maintaining full weapons and propulsion capabilities. The energy efficiency exceeds Republic or Separatist shield technology by approximately. Contact. Thor's voice cut across all channels. Multiple vessels dropping out of hyperspace. Configuration matches Separatist Providence-class dreadnoughts. 6 capital ships plus escort frigates. They're charging weapons. The observation platform erupted into chaos. Senators demanded explanations. Military personnel barked orders into communicators. The Jedi ignited lightsabers, blue and green plasma blades casting dancing shadows as they moved to defensive positions. Through the viewport, hyperspace exit flashes lit the darkness as the Separatist fleet materialized. Massive dagger-shaped warships bristling with weapons, their hulls painted in the gray and bronze colors of the Confederacy Navy. Droid starfighters began launching, thousands of vulture droids forming attack patterns that looked like metal storms. "This is Admiral Trench," a voice crackled across all frequencies, the speaker's accent thick and predatory. "Surrender the Asgard vessel and the extragalactic visitors immediately. Resist, and we will destroy the observation platform with all aboard. You have 3 minutes to comply." How did they know? Anakin demanded, his mechanical hand clenching his lightsaber hilt. This demonstration was classified. Only Republic Command and invited neutrals knew the details. "Someone talked," O'Neill said grimly. "Or someone's been monitoring our communications all along." He activated his comm, Thor, tactical options. "The Beliskner can defend itself indefinitely," Thor responded. "However, the observation platform lacks significant defensive capabilities. If the Separatist fleet focuses fire, I cannot protect both it and ourselves simultaneously." "Then don't protect us," Bail Organa said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "Save the civilians. Get as many people off this platform as possible before." "Before nothing," O'Neill interrupted. "Thor, how many people can you beam simultaneously?" "The platform holds approximately 300 beings. I can transport that number in multiple sequences, but the process will take approximately 90 seconds. During that time, the Beliskner cannot maintain full defensive posture." "Colonel, they're charging weapons," Carter reported, her scanner showing energy buildup across the Separatist fleet. O'Neill made a command decision. "Thor, start beaming people now. Prioritize civilians, then military personnel, then us. Carter, Teal'c, Daniel, cover the evacuation. Anakin, Obi-Wan, if you've got any Force tricks that can buy us time, now's the moment." "We can try," Obi-Wan said, though his expression suggested the odds were poor. White light began flashing across the observation platform as the Asgard transport beam pulled people away in groups of 20. Senators vanished mid-sentence. Military analysts disappeared while clutching their datapads. The crowd's panic shifted from terror to confused hope as they realized they were being evacuated. But Admiral Trench was no fool. The Separatist fleet adjusted targeting, locking weapons not on the observation platform but on Alderaan itself. New terms, Trench announced. Surrender immediately, or we target the planetary shield generators. Your precious Alderaan will burn, and millions will die. This is your final warning. He's bluffing, Anakin said. Even the Separatists wouldn't commit an atrocity like that. Are you willing to bet millions of lives on that assessment? Bail Organa asked quietly. O'Neill saw the trap clearly. Surrender meant the Separatists got the Beliskner, got access to Asgard technology, and probably executed SG-1 as a message to anyone else who might interfere in the war. Resist meant Trench might actually follow through on his threat, and even if he was bluffing, the political damage would be catastrophic. Thor, O'Neill said, can we disable their weapons systems without destroying the ships? Possibly. Asgard weapons can be calibrated for precision strikes. However, 6 capital ships represent significant targeting challenges. I cannot guarantee success before at least some of them fire on Alderaan. Then we need to reduce the number of targets, Carter said. She was already running calculations on her tablet, her scientific mind processing tactical options at computer speed. Thor, can you selectively beam explosives directly into their reactor cores? Major Carter, that would constitute an offensive act that violates the Protected Planets Treaty, Thor began. They're about to commit genocide. Carter snapped. Sometimes the ethical choice is the one that saves the most lives, not the one that follows protocol. Silence on the channel. Then, you are correct, Major. Preparing targeted transport. This will take approximately 40 seconds. We don't have 40 seconds, Anakin said. The Separatist ship's weapons were glowing, energy buildup reaching critical levels. Obi-Wan closed his eyes, reaching out through the Force with desperate concentration. Anakin, with me. Channel everything you have. The 2 Jedi extended their hands toward the Separatist fleet, and space itself seemed to ripple around the warships. O'Neill felt something, a pressure, a weight, a presence that had no name in his experience but felt like the universe itself was paying attention. The lead Providence-class dreadnought shuddered, its weapon systems flickering. It wasn't much, the Jedi couldn't physically damage ships at that range, but they'd created interference, disrupted targeting computers, bought precious seconds. Transport successful, Thor announced. Explosive devices materialized in reactor cores of all 6 capital ships. Detonation in 3, 2, 1. The Separatist fleet exploded simultaneously. Not the spectacular fireballs of atmospheric explosions, but the silent, strangely beautiful eruptions of ships rupturing in vacuum. Reactor cores went critical, chain reactions cascaded through systems, and in less than 10 seconds, 6 Providence-class dreadnoughts transformed into expanding clouds of debris. The droid starfighters, suddenly without command ships, broke formation. Some attempted to retreat to hyperspace. Others simply shut down, their limited AI unable to function without the control signal from the fleet. Alderaan Defense Force ships began emerging from the planet's shadow, launching interceptors to clean up the remaining droids. They'd been too far out of position to engage the Separatist fleet directly, but they could handle the scattered remnants. The observation platform had been evacuated, empty except for SG-1, the 2 Jedi, and Bail Organa, who had refused to leave while his people were in danger. By the Force, Obi-Wan whispered, staring at the debris field. You destroyed 6 capital ships in seconds. We disabled 6 capital ships that were threatening to commit genocide, O'Neill corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Bail Organa asked, and his voice carried a complex mixture of gratitude and concern. Colonel O'Neill, you just demonstrated the ability to bypass shields, materialize explosives inside ships, and destroy an entire battle fleet without firing a single visible shot. Do you understand what that means? It means we kept Alderaan safe, Daniel said, but even he sounded uncertain. It means you've made yourselves the most dangerous beings in the galaxy, Bail said bluntly. Every faction will now see you as either an asset to acquire or a threat to eliminate. There's no middle ground anymore. Thor transported them back to the Beliskner, where the command center buzzed with activity. Asgard scientists analyzed the battle, calculated energy expenditures, assessed tactical outcomes. "Colonel, I must report that Major Carter's suggestion was effective but has created significant ethical complications," Thor said. "The Asgard High Council will need to review our actions here. Using transport technology to materialize explosives inside enemy vessels represents a threshold we have not crossed in millennia. We saved millions of lives," Carter said defensively. "Yes," Thor agreed. "Which is why the Council will likely approve our actions. But understand, we have demonstrated capabilities that will fundamentally change how this galaxy views both the Asgard and your team. We are no longer neutral observers seeking cooperation. We are now perceived as weapons." O'Neill sank into a chair, the adrenaline of combat fading into exhausted awareness of consequences. Thor's right. We just showed everyone in this galaxy exactly what we can do. And they're all going to draw their own conclusions about what that means. "The Senate will want explanations," Daniel said. "The Jedi will have questions about how we knew the attack was coming. The Separatists, what's left of their leadership, will demand accountability for destroying their fleet. And Palpatine," Obi-Wan said quietly, having been transported to the Beliskner along with Anakin, "will find a way to use this to consolidate more power. He's a master at turning crises into opportunities. This attack, the demonstration of Asgard capabilities, the questions about intelligence leaks, he'll weaponize all of it." "Someone set us up," Anakin said, pacing the command center with barely contained fury. "Someone knew about the demonstration, contacted the Separatists, and arranged this ambush. And I think we all know who had the access and motivation to do it. Count Dooku," Obi-Wan supplied. "He offered you an alliance. You refused. This was his response, proof that neutrality isn't possible in this war." "Maybe," O'Neill said. "Or maybe it goes deeper than Dooku. Galen Erso warned us something would go wrong. Thor detected anomalies in Palpatine's biosignature. The whole war shows signs of orchestration. What if this attack wasn't about capturing us or intimidating the Republic? What if it was about forcing us to choose sides by demonstrating our capabilities? That's a concerning level of manipulation," Thor observed. "It's also exactly the kind of long-term strategic thinking we've seen from the Goa'uld," Teal'c said. "Create situations where every choice serves your ultimate purpose. If SG-1 had surrendered, the Separatists would have gained Asgard technology. If we fought, we revealed our capabilities and eliminated any pretense of neutrality. Either outcome benefits someone. Then we need to figure out who that someone is," O'Neill said. "And we need to do it before they spring the next trap." On Coruscant, in chambers shielded from all observation, Darth Sidious reviewed battle recordings with cold satisfaction. The demonstration had exceeded expectations. The Asgard technology was even more formidable than anticipated, beaming capabilities that bypassed shields, precision that could materialize weapons inside ships, power that could eliminate battle fleets in seconds. All of it would be his. All of it would serve the Sith's purpose. SG-1 had crossed the threshold from neutral parties to active participants. They'd killed Separatist forces, violated their own ethical guidelines, demonstrated capabilities that made them targets for every intelligence service in the galaxy. And in doing so, they'd ensured that the chaos Sidious needed would continue to escalate. The Republic would demand exclusive access to Asgard technology. The Separatists would seek revenge. Neutral systems would scramble to make their own deals. And in the center of it all, Palpatine would maneuver, consolidate, and ultimately control. Admiral Trench served his purpose, Sidious said to the holographic form of Count Dooku, who listened with carefully concealed frustration. His sacrifice demonstrated to the galaxy that the Separatist alliance will stop at nothing to acquire advanced technology. And it forced our visitors to reveal capabilities they'd hoped to keep hidden. They destroyed 6 capital ships, Master, Dooku said. The Confederacy Navy cannot sustain such losses. The Confederacy exists to serve a purpose, not to win, Sidious reminded him. And that purpose advances perfectly. Soon, very soon, we will have everything we need, the technology, the genetic research, and the elimination of any threats to our grand design. The pieces were in motion. The trap was closing. And somewhere in the void between stars, soldiers from another galaxy were beginning to realize they'd entered a game where the rules had been written long before they arrived, and where winning and losing might be illusions designed to serve something far darker than they'd imagined. The political fallout from the Battle of Alderaan arrived faster than any hyperspace jump. Within hours, the Senate chamber was again packed with delegates demanding answers, explanations, and, depending on their faction, either exclusive access to SG-1 or their immediate expulsion from the galaxy. Chancellor Palpatine presided over the chaos with his characteristic grandfatherly concern, allowing the fury to build before calling for order. Distinguished senators, Palpatine's voice cut through the noise like a blade. We face an unprecedented situation. Our guests prevented a massacre, millions of Alderaanian lives were saved through their intervention. Yet in doing so, they demonstrated military capabilities that fundamentally alter the strategic balance of this war. We must address both the gratitude we owe and the concerns we harbor. SG-1 stood once again on the central podium, but the atmosphere had changed. Yesterday they'd been curious anomalies. Today they were weapons whose allegiance would determine outcomes. Senator Teal'c of Mon Calamari spoke first, his amphibious features flushed with agitation. How did the Separatists know about the demonstration? This was classified Republic intelligence. Either we have a spy in the Senate, or our guests' communications have been compromised. Or the Separatists have intelligence capabilities that exceed your estimates, O'Neill said bluntly. We've been broadcasting on multiple channels, meeting with various factions, making no secret of our presence. Anyone with decent signals intelligence could have tracked our movements. Yet the timing was precise, another senator noted. They arrived exactly when your ship was uncloaked, when the observation platform was most vulnerable. That suggests inside information, not random interception. Daniel stepped forward, his archaeologist's instinct for patterns clicking into place. Senator, with respect, you're asking the wrong questions. The real question isn't how the Separatists knew, it's why they attacked at all. Think about it, 6 Providence-class dreadnoughts, one of their best admirals, a direct assault on Alderaan during a diplomatic demonstration. That's not reconnaissance. That's not opportunism. That's a calculated escalation designed to force a specific response. And what response would that be? Bail Organa asked, though his expression suggested he already knew. To make us choose sides, Carter said. Before the attack, we could maintain neutrality. We could negotiate with multiple factions, structure cooperation that didn't favor Republic or Separatist interests. But now, we've destroyed Separatist forces. We've demonstrated capabilities that make us strategic assets. Neutrality is no longer an option. Precisely, Palpatine said, his voice carrying calculated sympathy. Which is why I must ask, Colonel O'Neill, will you stand with the Republic? We face an existential threat from the Separatist alliance. Your technology could shorten this war, save millions of lives, and restore peace to the galaxy. Surely beings of conscience cannot remain neutral when such stakes are involved. O'Neill felt the trap closing. Refuse, and they'd be painted as complicit in Separatist atrocities. Agree, and they'd be weapons in someone else's war, a war Thor's analysis suggested was being manipulated by forces they didn't understand. Chancellor, O'Neill said carefully, we came here to help the Asgard survive. That mission hasn't changed. Yes, we defended Alderaan because the alternative was genocide. But that doesn't mean we're enlisting in the Grand Army of the Republic. We're not soldiers in your war. Then whose soldiers are you? A Neimoidian senator demanded. You carry weapons. You travel in a warship. You killed thousands of Separatist personnel without hesitation. You are soldiers, Colonel. The only question is whose cause you serve. We serve Earth, Teal'c said, his deep voice resonating through the chamber. We fight the Goa'uld, who enslave entire populations and claim divinity. We ally with the Asgard because they have earned our trust through millennia of ethical conduct. We came to this galaxy seeking cooperation, not conquest. That someone forced us into combat does not obligate us to choose sides in a conflict we do not fully understand. You understand enough, Palpatine said softly. You've seen Separatist brutality firsthand. You've witnessed their willingness to threaten civilian populations. Surely you recognize which side represents legitimate government versus corporate tyranny. We've also seen Republic clone soldiers, Daniel interjected. Sentient beings created for war, treated as property by some, denied basic rights despite their service. We've observed a Senate paralyzed by corruption and bureaucracy. And we've noted that this war has been raging for 3 years with no resolution, despite both sides having the capability to achieve decisive victory. Forgive us if we're skeptical about simple good versus evil narratives. The chamber erupted. Some senators applauded Daniel's directness. Others shouted accusations of Separatist sympathy. The Jedi observers remained silent, but Obi-Wan and Mace Windu exchanged meaningful glances. The council had harbored similar doubts but couldn't voice them publicly without undermining their position. Order. Palpatine's voice carried force-enhanced authority that brought instant silence. Dr. Jackson raises legitimate concerns. The Republic is imperfect. We acknowledge this. But imperfection does not equal equivalence with those who would destroy democratic governance entirely. I propose a compromise. SG-1 will continue their genetic research with full Republic support, but they will not be required to provide offensive military technology. Defensive systems only, shields, sensors, medical applications. Nothing that could be weaponized for aggressive warfare. It was a masterful political move, appearing reasonable while establishing Republic control over the relationship, limiting what the Separatists could demand, and creating a framework where Palpatine could gradually expand the definition of defensive technology. O'Neill saw the manipulation but also recognized they had limited options. We'll consider that framework. But we need guarantees that our research protocols remain under joint oversight, that genetic samples are collected ethically, and that we maintain the right to terminate cooperation if we discover we're being exploited. Acceptable, Palpatine said smoothly. Senator Organa, would Alderaan be willing to host a joint oversight commission? Your world's neutrality and commitment to ethical standards are well known. Bail Organa nodded slowly. Alderaan would consider that responsibility. Though I must note that we'll need significant resources and diplomatic immunity for commission members. This undertaking will make us targets. The Republic will provide whatever support is necessary, Palpatine assured him. This is a matter of galactic importance. As the session concluded and senators departed to brief their governments, SG-1 gathered with the Jedi Council in a secure conference room. Yoda's ears were flat against his head, his expression more troubled than O'Neill had seen. Manipulation, that was, Yoda said bluntly. Maneuvered you, the Chancellor did. Into Republic service, without appearing to force you. Skillful, he is. Too skillful, perhaps. Master Yoda, Obi-Wan said carefully, are you suggesting the Chancellor orchestrated the Separatist attack? Suggesting anything, I am not, Yoda replied. But patterns, I see. Convenient, this crisis was. Convenient, the timing. Convenient, the outcome. Too many conveniences, coincidence becomes. Mace Windu leaned forward. The Council has discussed our concerns about Chancellor Palpatine privately. His accumulation of power, the way crises seem to serve his political interests, the dark side presence we sense but cannot locate. But we have no proof of wrongdoing, nothing concrete enough to act upon. What about his biosignature? Carter asked. Thor detected anomalies. Could those be evidence of force manipulation or something else unusual? We could investigate, Obi-Wan said. But approaching the Supreme Chancellor with accusations based on alien sensor readings would be problematic. If we're wrong, we undermine the Jedi's credibility. If we're right but lack proof, we alert him to our suspicions. Then we need proof, O'Neill said. Thor, you've been analyzing Clone Wars data. What have you found? Thor's holographic form materialized in the conference room. Colonel, my analysis reveals disturbing patterns. Communication intercepts suggest coordination between Republic and Separatist intelligence operations that should be impossible if they were truly adversarial. Resource allocation on both sides appears designed to prolong conflict rather than achieve victory. And financial transfers through intermediaries suggest both war machines are partially funded by the same sources. You're saying the war is fake? Anakin demanded, his mechanical hand clenching into a fist. Not fake, Thor clarified. The casualties are real, the suffering is genuine, the military operations are conducted as actual combat. But the strategic direction appears orchestrated to maintain equilibrium rather than pursue decisive outcomes. Someone benefits from the war's continuation. The banking clans, Mace Windu said grimly. They finance both sides, profit from the conflict. We've known this for years. But what if it goes deeper? Daniel suggested. What if the financial beneficiaries are symptoms, not the cause? What if someone is using the war to achieve goals that have nothing to do with Republic versus Separatist ideology? Such as? Obi-Wan asked. Consolidation of power, Daniel said. Emergency powers granted to the Chancellor. Military authority concentrated in executive hands. Democratic institutions weakened by years of crisis. If you wanted to transform a republic into an empire, you'd need exactly the kind of prolonged emergency that this war provides. The Jedi sat in stunned silence. The theory was treasonous, unthinkable, yet it explained so much. If this is true, Shaak Ti said slowly, then we face an enemy more dangerous than any Sith Lord in history. One who controls both sides of a galactic war, who has positioned himself at the heart of Republic power, who may be orchestrating everything from the Senate itself. We need evidence, Mace insisted. Theories and sensor anomalies aren't enough. We need concrete proof of deception, manipulation, or treason. Without that, we're just conspiracy theorists undermining our own government. Then let's get evidence, O'Neill said. Thor, can you trace those financial transfers? Find the ultimate source of funding for both war machines. I can attempt to do so, but the layers of corporate shell entities and encrypted banking channels will make definitive conclusions difficult. It may take weeks. We don't have weeks, Carter said. She pulled up a holographic calendar. The Mandalorian genetic research begins in 4 days. The Kaminoan facilities visit is scheduled for next week. And Senator Bertoni has been pressing for a private meeting to discuss technical specifications that her messages suggest go beyond medical applications. She wants military cloning technology, Teal'c stated. The Kaminoans see the Asgard crisis as an opportunity to acquire advanced genetic manipulation capabilities. They are not interested in saving a species. They are interested in perfecting their craft. Which brings us back to the central problem, O'Neill said. Every faction in this galaxy sees us as tools to be used. The Republic wants our technology for military advantage. The Separatists want revenge or acquisition. The Kaminoans want our genetic expertise. And someone, possibly Palpatine, possibly someone else, is orchestrating events to ensure that whoever wins, they control the outcome. So what do we do? Anakin asked. We can't trust anyone, we can't stay neutral, and we can't leave without condemning the Asgard to extinction. Daniel stood and walked to the viewport, staring out at Coruscant's endless cityscape. We do what we've always done when faced with impossible situations. We find a third option. We thread the needle between the choices we're being offered. Explain, Yoda commanded, leaning forward with interest. We fulfill our mission. Help the Asgard, collect genetic research, establish cooperation with willing participants. But we do it in ways that can't be weaponized, that don't favor one side over the other, that give us intelligence about who's really pulling the strings. We become investigators disguised as diplomats. You want to spy on the people we're negotiating with, Bail Organa said, having listened quietly throughout. That's ethically complicated. Everything about this situation is ethically complicated, Daniel countered. But I'd rather violate diplomatic norms than discover we've handed galaxy-conquering technology to a Sith Lord who's been playing both sides of a war for 3 years. The Council agrees, Mace Windu said after a long pause. We'll provide what support we can, though it must be discreet. If our suspicions about the Chancellor are correct, direct Jedi involvement could trigger responses we're not prepared to handle. We'll help too, Bail said. Alderaan's intelligence service isn't as extensive as some, but we have contacts, resources, and most importantly, a reputation for neutrality that gives us access others lack. O'Neill looked around the room at the unlikely alliance they'd assembled, Jedi Masters questioning their own government, a senator risking treason, his own team operating far beyond their original mission parameters. All right, he said finally. We split our focus. Carter and Thor work on the genetic research with Mandalore and any other willing participants. That's our legitimate mission, our cover for being here. Daniel and Bail trace the financial networks, try to identify who's funding both sides. Teal'c and I work with the Jedi to investigate Palpatine specifically, his background, his rise to power, any connections to the Sith. And we all watch for the next trap, because there will be one. Agreed, Yoda said. But careful, we must be. Playing games with a Sith Lord, dangerous it is. Underestimate them, many have. Survive, few did. That night, aboard the Beliskner, SG-1 gathered in private. The weight of what they'd undertaken was settling in, they weren't just helping the Asgard anymore. They were investigating a potential galaxy-wide conspiracy, challenging beings with powers they didn't understand, and risking consequences they couldn't predict. Jack, Daniel said quietly, are we sure about this? We came here for genetic samples. Now we're essentially conducting espionage against the Supreme Chancellor of the Republic. That's a significant escalation. You were the one who suggested the third option, O'Neill reminded him. I know. I'm just making sure we've thought through the implications. If we're wrong about Palpatine, we've committed treason against the legitimate government of this galaxy. If we're right, then we're fighting something that's been planning for decades, that controls unimaginable resources, that has already outmaneuvered everyone else. Which is exactly why we need to do this, Carter said. Because if Palpatine or whoever's behind this gets access to Asgard technology, to beaming capabilities and advanced weapons and genetic research, then whatever they're planning becomes unstoppable. We have a responsibility to make sure we're not handing tools to a tyrant. The Goa'uld claimed to be gods, Teal'c said. They ruled through fear and deception for millennia because no one questioned their power until it was too late. I will not make that mistake again. If there is darkness at the heart of this republic, we must expose it, regardless of the personal cost. O'Neill looked at his team, the best people he'd ever known, now committed to a course of action that could get them killed or worse. Then we're doing this. All in, no backing out. We find the truth about this war, we help the Asgard, and we try not to get everyone killed in the process. Sound like a plan? Terrible plan, Carter said. Likely to fail catastrophically, Daniel agreed. Death seems probable, Teal'c confirmed. Perfect, O'Neill said. Just like every other Tuesday at the SGC. Let's get to work. In his meditation chamber deep within the Senate building, Darth Sidious felt the currents of the Force shift. SG-1 was investigating, the Jedi were questioning, and alliances were forming that could threaten decades of careful planning. But Sidious had not orchestrated the Clone Wars by being inflexible. Every threat was an opportunity. Every investigation could be misdirected. Every alliance could be turned. The visitors from another galaxy believed they were being clever, conducting espionage while maintaining their cover of diplomatic research. They didn't understand that in a game where he controlled both sides, every move they made was still a move on his board. Let them investigate. Let them find carefully placed breadcrumbs leading toward Count Dooku, toward separatist conspiracies, toward anything except the truth sitting in plain sight at the heart of Republic power. And when they'd served their purpose, when the Asgard technology was secured and the genetic research was complete, then Darth Sidious would show these extragalactic visitors what happened to those who interfered with the Sith's grand design. The trap was evolving. But it was still closing. Kamino emerged from hyperspace like a ghost planet, endless gray oceans beneath endless gray clouds, lightning arcing between atmospheric layers, rain falling in sheets that made sensor readings difficult even for Asgard technology. The Kaminoans had built their civilization here, on platforms that rose above the storm-tossed seas, creating one of the galaxy's most advanced cloning facilities in one of its most inhospitable environments. "I hate this place already," O'Neill muttered as the Beliskner descended through the turbulence. "It's like Seattle had a baby with a hurricane and decided to make it permanent." "The environment is intentional," Carter explained, studying atmospheric data. "The constant storms provide natural electromagnetic interference that makes orbital surveillance difficult. The isolation ensures secrecy. It's a perfect location for classified research. Or for things you don't want anyone else to see," Daniel added quietly. They debated for 2 days whether to accept Senator Bertoni's invitation to visit Kamino. The Kaminoan cloning facilities represented the best chance to acquire the genetic expertise the Asgard needed, but they were also the heart of the Republic's military infrastructure. Every clone soldier, every genetically engineered warrior, every piece of the Grand Army originated here. "The Jedi Council advised against this visit," Obi-Wan said. He'd insisted on accompanying them, partly for diplomatic protocol, partly because his previous mission to Kamino had revealed uncomfortable truths about the clone army's origins. The Kaminoans are brilliant scientists, but they view life as raw material to be perfected. Their ethics are flexible. "Sounds like some scientists I've met," O'Neill said, though his expression was grim. "Thor, you picking up anything unusual?" "The facility's shielding prevents detailed scans," Thor reported. "However, I am detecting power signatures consistent with large-scale genetic sequencing, artificial gestation chambers, and what appear to be behavioral conditioning systems. The Kaminoans are operating cloning programs of extraordinary scale." "Millions of soldiers," Anakin said from his position near the viewport. The young Jedi had been unusually quiet since they departed Coruscant, his mechanical hand clenching and unclenching with tension. "Living beings, created to fight and die in a war they never chose. And we're considering helping the species that perfected this process. The Asgard's cloning technology is failing, Anakin," Carter said gently. "If the Kaminoans can help identify what's going wrong, it could save an entire civilization from extinction. That's worth navigating some moral complexity." "Is it?" Anakin turned to face them, and O'Neill saw the conflict in his eyes. The former slave who'd been freed, now negotiating with those who created beings for servitude. Where's the line? At what point does survival not justify what we're willing to do to achieve it? "That's the question we've been asking since we arrived," Daniel said. "And I don't think there's a simple answer. But I do know that refusing to engage because the situation is morally complicated means we never help anyone. Sometimes you have to work with imperfect people to achieve important goals." The Beliskner settled onto Tipoca City's landing platform, rain hammering against the ship's shields. Through the viewport, they could see the city's distinctive architecture, tall spires connected by walkways, everything designed with mathematical precision, sterile white surfaces that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. A delegation waited on the platform, protected by energy umbrellas that repelled the rain. Lama Su, the Prime Minister of Kamino, stood at the center, tall, gray-skinned, with elongated features and large black eyes that studied the Beliskner with clinical interest. Beside him was Taun We, a senior research administrator, and Senator Bertoni, who'd arranged the entire visit. "Welcome to Kamino," Lama Su said as SG-1 disembarked. His voice was soft, almost musical, completely at odds with the industrial storm around them. "We are honored to host beings from beyond our galaxy. Your Asgard colleagues' cloning crisis presents fascinating challenges. We look forward to collaborative problem-solving." Prime Minister, O'Neill said, extending his hand for the human custom of greeting before remembering that Kaminoans didn't typically engage in physical contact. He awkwardly converted the gesture to a slight bow. "We appreciate the invitation. The Asgard are desperate for solutions, and your expertise in cloning technology is renowned." "Renowned and necessary," Senator Bertoni added, her black eyes reflecting the lightning that split the sky behind them. "The Grand Army requires constant production to replace battlefield casualties. We've achieved efficiency that would have been impossible a decade ago. But there is always room for improvement." They were escorted through sterile corridors lined with viewports that revealed glimpses of the facility's scope, chambers filled with gestation tanks, thousands of them, each containing a developing clone at various stages of growth. Technicians moved between the tanks with practiced efficiency, monitoring biological data, adjusting growth hormones, ensuring that each clone developed according to specifications. "This is horrifying," Daniel whispered to O'Neill. "They're growing people like crops." "They're growing soldiers," Obi-Wan corrected quietly. "There's a difference, though perhaps not as much of one as the Republic would prefer to believe." Lama Su led them to a conference chamber overlooking one of the main cloning facilities. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, they could observe the entire process, from genetic sequencing to artificial gestation to accelerated growth chambers where clone soldiers matured at twice the normal human rate. "The army you see below represents our contract with the Republic," Lama Su explained, his tone carrying pride in technical achievement. 5 million units completed, with production continuing at a rate of 100,000 per solar cycle. Each clone is genetically identical to our source template, Jango Fett, a Mandalorian warrior of exceptional quality. Each is enhanced for military capabilities, conditioned for loyalty, and trained for combat efficiency. "Enhanced how?" Carter asked, her scientific curiosity overriding her moral discomfort. "Increased muscle density, improved reflexes, enhanced neural plasticity for rapid skill acquisition, and most importantly, Taun We activated a holographic display showing genetic markers, behavioral conditioning that ensures obedience to Republic authority. They are engineered to be perfect soldiers." "Engineered to be slaves," Anakin said, his voice hard. The Kaminoans exchanged glances. Lama Su's expression remained neutral, but something in his body language suggested this wasn't the first time he'd faced that accusation. "They are purpose-bred organisms designed for specific function," Lama Su said carefully. "No different than domesticated animals or agricultural crops, except more complex. They have no existence outside military service. To call them slaves implies they had freedom that was taken. They were never free. They were created to serve." "They're sentient," Obi-Wan interjected. "I fought alongside clone troopers. They have personalities, preferences, fears, hopes. They form friendships, mourn their fallen, question orders when those orders conflict with their values. They're not machines, Prime Minister. They're people. Legally, they are property of the Galactic Republic," Senator Bertoni stated flatly. "This debate has been settled by Senate decree. The clones are military assets, not citizens. Their rights extend only as far as military regulations dictate." Teal'c had been silent throughout the tour, but now he stepped forward, his warriors bearing commanding attention. "I was created to serve false gods. Genetically engineered to be the perfect host for parasitic masters. I was told I had no purpose beyond servitude, no existence outside the role designed for me. I was told I was property. He let the words hang in the sterile air. Those who told me these things were wrong. I chose freedom. I chose to fight for those still enslaved. And now I stand in a facility that creates millions of beings and tells them they have no choice, no freedom, no purpose beyond dying in someone else's war. You are slavers, whether you acknowledge it or not. The silence that followed was profound. Even the Kaminoans, with their clinical detachment, seemed affected by Teal'c's testimony. We are not here to debate Republic military policy, Lama Su said finally, though his tone carried defensive notes. We are here to discuss the Asgard genetic crisis. Perhaps we should focus on that purpose. Thor's holographic form materialized in the conference chamber. The Asgard had been monitoring from the Beliskner, analyzing the cloning facilities with sensors that penetrated the Kaminoan shielding. Prime Minister, Thor said, I have reviewed your cloning processes. The technical sophistication is impressive, but I note several concerning elements. Your accelerated growth protocols and behavioral conditioning both introduce genetic stresses similar to those affecting Asgard clones. You are creating cascade failures that will manifest in later generations. Taunwi leaned forward with sudden intensity. Explain this cascade failure. We've observed minor degradation in 4th and 5th generation clones, but our models predicted stable reproduction for at least 20 generations. Your models are incorrect, Thor stated bluntly. Accelerated growth compresses cellular division timelines, accumulating replication errors faster than natural processes would reveal them. Behavioral conditioning rewrites neural patterns at the genetic level, creating epigenetic markers that become more pronounced with each subsequent generation. Within 10 generations, you will observe significant cognitive degradation. Within 20, complete reproductive failure. The Kaminoans exchanged rapid glances, communicating in their own language with clicks and soft whistles that the translation devices couldn't parse. Finally, Lama Su turned back to Thor with something approaching desperation in his large black eyes. If what you say is accurate, our entire methodology is fundamentally flawed. The Republic's clone army, all our research, centuries of work, all of it is building toward inevitable failure. Yes, Thor confirmed. Which is precisely the problem the Asgard face. We have reached the inevitable endpoint of your current trajectory. But we believe that by combining Kaminoan cloning expertise with Asgard genetic understanding and the diverse genetic material available in this galaxy, we can develop solutions that benefit both our civilizations. What solutions? Senator Bertoni demanded. Specifically, what are you offering? Carter pulled up holographic data on her tablet, carefully curated information that Thor had approved for sharing. Genetic stabilization techniques that prevent replication error accumulation. Cellular rejuvenation protocols that reverse damage from accelerated growth. Neural pattern preservation that maintains cognitive function across multiple generations. And most importantly, methods to introduce genetic diversity that prevents cascade failures while maintaining desired traits. This is extraordinary, Taunwi breathed, studying the data with the intensity of a researcher who'd just seen the answer to questions that had plagued her for years. With these techniques, we could extend clone viability indefinitely. We could create stable lineages that don't degrade. We could perfect the process. Perfect the process of creating slaves, Anakin said bitterly. Or save millions of beings who currently exist and face genetic collapse, Daniel countered, though his expression suggested he shared Anakin's discomfort. This is the moral tightrope we're walking. Yes, we're potentially enabling a system we find ethically problematic. But we're also preventing suffering for beings who already exist and have no control over how they were created. What do you want in return? Lama Su asked Thor directly. Access to your genetic databases, Thor said. Specifically, the diverse templates you've collected over centuries of cloning research. The Mandalorian genome, the various species you've worked with, the genetic markers you've identified for specific traits. We need that diversity to reverse our own cascade failures. That information is proprietary, Senator Bertoni objected. Kamino's commercial value depends on maintaining exclusive access to our genetic libraries. Then we offer a trade, Carter said. Our stabilization techniques, which solve your degradation problems, in exchange for access to genetic diversity that solves the Asgard's reproduction crisis. Both species benefit. Both civilizations survive. Lama Su considered carefully, his elongated fingers steepling in a gesture that transcended species. We must consult with the Kaminoan Council. This represents a significant decision, sharing genetic data we've protected for centuries. But if your analysis is correct, if our cloning methodology is fundamentally flawed, then we may have no choice. Survival trumps proprietary concerns. How long for a decision? O'Neill asked. 3 days, Lama Su said. During which time, you are welcome to remain on Kamino. We can arrange tours of our additional facilities, demonstrations of our more advanced techniques, and consultations with our senior geneticists. We appreciate the hospitality, O'Neill said, though every instinct screamed that staying on Kamino for 3 days was a terrible idea. We'll coordinate with the Beliskner and confirm our schedule. As they departed the conference chamber and were escorted to guest quarters, Obi-Wan pulled O'Neill aside. Colonel, I have a bad feeling about this. 3 days gives whoever's watching us, and someone is definitely watching, plenty of time to make moves we won't anticipate. I know, O'Neill agreed. But Carter's right about the moral tightrope. We don't help the clones by refusing to engage with the only people who can actually solve their genetic problems. We just have to make sure we're not making things worse in the process. That night, in quarters that were comfortable but clearly designed for observation, SG-1 held a quiet council. They'd swept for listening devices and found 17 different surveillance systems, some obvious, some sophisticated enough that only Asgard sensors detected them. They're monitoring everything, Carter said quietly. Conversations, biological data, even our sleep patterns. The Kaminoans document every variable. Then we use that, Daniel suggested. We feed them information that moves our agenda forward. We're here legitimately for genetic research. We discuss that openly, enthusiastically even. Meanwhile, we're also investigating the financial networks that fund the clone army, looking for connections to whoever's manipulating the war. Thor's been analyzing Kaminoan banking records, Carter said. The contract for the clone army was funded through incredibly complex financial instruments, layers of shell corporations, encrypted transfers, sources that can't be easily traced. But there are patterns. Someone with vast resources set this entire operation in motion 10 years ago. Someone who knew the Clone Wars were coming before the Separatist movement even existed. Palpatine, O'Neill said. It keeps coming back to him. He's been Chancellor for how long? 13 years, Obi-Wan supplied. He was a relatively minor senator before the Trade Federation invaded Naboo. That crisis propelled him to the chancellorship. And every crisis since has somehow expanded his authority. Convenient, Teal'c observed. Too convenient, Daniel agreed. If he orchestrated the clone army's creation, anticipated the war, and positioned himself to benefit from the chaos, then everything we're doing here, all our negotiations, all our technology sharing, it's all serving his ultimate purpose. Then we need proof, O'Neill said. Something concrete that connects Palpatine to the clone army's origins, to the war's orchestration, to the Sith that Dooku mentioned. Without that, we're just another conspiracy theory. A soft chime interrupted them, an incoming transmission on a secured channel they hadn't established. Carter's eyes widened as she checked the source. It's Galen Erso, she said. The scientist who warned us about the Alderaan demonstration. He says he has information about Kamino's financial records and needs to speak with us immediately. Could be a trap, O'Neill said. Everything could be a trap at this point, Daniel countered. But if he actually has proof about the funding sources, it's worth the risk. They accepted the transmission. Galen Erso's holographic form appeared, and even in the flickering blue projection, they could see fear in his eyes. "I don't have much time," Galen said rapidly. "I've traced the financial networks that paid for the clone army. The trail leads through dozens of corporations, but I found the source. It's a Sith Lord named Darth Sidious. I don't know his real identity, but he's been operating for decades, manipulating both Republic and Separatist leadership. And Colonel O'Neill," his voice dropped to an urgent whisper, "he knows you're investigating. He knows what you're looking for. You're in danger. All of you." The transmission cut out suddenly, replaced by static. Then alarms began blaring throughout Tipoca City. "Security breach," Carter said, checking her scanner. "Multiple unauthorized access points. Someone has activated a localized interdiction field. I cannot transport through the interference. You'll need to reach higher ground, above the field's effective range." "Who's attacking?" Anakin demanded, his lightsaber already ignited. "Unknown," Obi-Wan said, but his expression was grim. "But the targeting is too precise to be random. Someone wants something from this facility, and they're willing to fight through Kaminoan defenses to get it." Explosions rocked the building. Through the viewports, they saw sections of the cloning facility breaching. Gestation tanks rupturing, thousands of developing clones exposed to Kamino's hostile atmosphere, dying before they'd even lived. "We have to help them," Anakin said, moving toward the door. "Help who?" O'Neill asked. "The clones who can't survive outside their tanks. The Kaminoans who created them as property. Or ourselves, because right now we're caught in someone else's war again." "Everyone," Anakin said simply. "We help everyone we can. That's what Jedi do. That's what good people do." He was right, of course. Even trapped in a morally complex situation, in a facility that represented everything wrong with the Clone Wars, they couldn't just abandon sentient beings to die. "All right," O'Neill said. "Carter, work with Thor to counter that interdiction field. Daniel, you're with her, I need your ability to talk our way past obstacles. Teal'c, Obi-Wan, Anakin, and I are going to try to get to the gestation chambers, save who we can. And everyone." He looked at his team with fierce intensity. "We get through this, and then we're having a serious conversation about whether this mission is worth what it's costing." They split up, running through corridors that shook with explosions, past Kaminoan technicians who stared at the destruction with clinical detachment even as their life's work burned around them. And somewhere in the storm, unseen attackers pressed forward, seeking something that only they understood. The trap had finally sprung. But whose trap it was, and what would be caught when it closed, remained terrifyingly unclear. The gestation chamber was a cathedral of dying potential, thousands of transparent tanks arranged in concentric circles, each containing a clone at various stages of development, and now each one rupturing under sustained weapons fire that came from everywhere and nowhere. Emergency lighting cast everything in red, alarms wailed in frequencies that hurt human ears, and through the shattered viewports, Kamino's perpetual storm howled with renewed fury. O'Neill, Teal'c, Anakin, and Obi-Wan burst into the chamber to find Kaminoan technicians working with desperate efficiency, manually disconnecting tanks that could still be saved, carrying gestation pods toward emergency shelters deep within the facility's protected core. But the attackers, still unseen, operating through automated weapons systems and remote-piloted combat droids, were systematically destroying everything. "They're not trying to capture the facility," Obi-Wan observed, deflecting blaster fire with his lightsaber while analyzing the attack pattern. "They're destroying the genetic databases. This is a purge, not a raid." Anakin force-pushed a collapsing support beam away from a cluster of tanks, buying precious seconds for technicians to evacuate the clones inside. Why destroy all this? These are millions of lives, years of research. Because someone doesn't want the Asgard getting access to it, O'Neill realized, the tactical picture suddenly clear. Someone who benefits from the Clone Wars continuing, from the genetic databases staying proprietary, from us not solving the Asgard crisis and potentially staying in this galaxy long enough to uncover what's really happening. A massive explosion rocked the northern wall, and through the breach, they finally saw the attackers. Droid commandos, advanced models unlike the standard Separatist battle droids, moving with precision and intelligence that suggested sophisticated AI or remote control by someone very skilled. Teal'c raised his P-90, firing controlled bursts that dropped 2 droids with shots to their optical sensors. These are not Separatist designs. The configuration is unique, the tactics more sophisticated than standard CIS protocols. They're custom-built, Obi-Wan agreed, his lightsaber humming as he carved through a droid that got too close. Someone commissioned these specifically for this mission. Someone with resources to build private armies. In the facility's central computer core, Carter worked frantically alongside Kaminoan technicians who'd overcome their initial suspicion to cooperate against a common threat. Her fingers flew across alien interfaces, adapting Earth computer training to Kaminoan systems while Thor fed her protocols through her earpiece. The interdiction field is projected from satellites in high orbit, Thor reported. But they're protected by defensive shields I cannot penetrate without using weapons that would alert every faction in this sector. I need you to disable the field from inside the facility. Working on it, Carter muttered, bypassing security protocols with techniques she'd learned from hacking Goa'uld mothership systems. Beside her, Daniel translated Kaminoan technical documentation, finding references to emergency protocols that could override external interference. Sam, the genetic databases are being systematically erased, Daniel said, watching destruction protocols cascade through the system. Someone's inside the network, purging everything, clone templates, research data, the Mandalorian genome sequences, everything the Asgard would need. Can you stop it? Carter asked. I can try to route the data to isolated servers, but, Daniel's fingers froze over the console as he read something on the display. Sam, this purge protocol was installed 10 years ago. It's been sitting dormant in the system since before the Clone Wars started, waiting for someone to activate it. Carter looked up from her work, the implications sinking in. Someone planned this a decade ago. Someone knew we'd eventually come here, knew we'd try to access the genetic databases, and prepared a way to destroy everything if that happened. Or someone simply didn't want this information surviving regardless of who tried to access it, Daniel suggested. This could be about covering tracks, eliminating evidence of how the clone army was really created. Senator Bertoni appeared in the corridor, her elegant features distorted by uncharacteristic fear. The attackers have breached the central cloning vault. All our primary templates, our most valuable genetic material, it's all in that vault. If they destroy it, Kamino loses centuries of accumulated research. Then we stop them, Carter said. Daniel, can you halt the data purge? I can slow it, maybe buy us an hour. But someone with administrative access is controlling this remotely. Unless we identify and stop them, the deletion will complete. Thor, any progress on tracking the remote control signal? Carter asked. Tracing now, Major, Thor responded. The signal originates from, this is unexpected. The control source is within the Senate building on Coruscant. Someone is directing this attack from the heart of Republic power. The pieces fell into place with horrifying clarity. This wasn't a separatist attack. This wasn't random terrorism. This was someone inside the Republic, someone with access to the highest levels of government, someone who had planned for a decade to ensure that the genetic databases would be destroyed if outsiders ever tried to access them. Someone who couldn't risk the truth about the clone army's origins being discovered. In the gestation chamber, the battle had intensified. More droid commandos poured through breaches in the walls, and now they were joined by something worse. Bioengineered creatures that looked like twisted combinations of multiple species, all teeth and claws and unnatural strength, grown in accelerated tanks and released without proper conditioning. Failed experiments, Lama Su shouted over the chaos, having emerged from his protected chambers to defend his life's work. Genetic chimeras we created years ago for military applications. Someone has released them all. Anakin's lightsaber carved through a creature that lunged at a Kaminoan technician, but O'Neill could see the young Jedi was reaching his limit. Too many enemies, too much destruction, too many beings dying despite their best efforts. "We need to fall back," O'Neill ordered. "Get the technicians to the emergency shelters. We can't save everyone, but we can save some." "No," Anakin said, and there was something dangerous in his voice. "We save them all. I'm not leaving anyone behind." "Skywalker," Obi-Wan began. "I'm not leaving them." Anakin's rage exploded outward in the Force, a wave of telekinetic power that hurled droids and creatures across the chamber, crushed them against walls, bought precious seconds of respite. But O'Neill recognized the cost. That kind of power came with consequences, drew on something dark and desperate that the Jedi claimed to reject. "Easy, kid," O'Neill said, gripping Anakin's shoulder. "I know what it's like to want to save everyone. But sometimes surviving means knowing when to retreat so you can fight another day." "You don't understand," Anakin said, his mechanical hand trembling. "I was a slave. I watched people die because they couldn't fight back, because they had no choice, because someone decided their lives didn't matter. These clones, they're the same. Created to serve, dying for a war they didn't choose. If I abandon them now, I'm no better than the masters who enslaved me." Teal'c stepped forward, his warriors bearing commanding attention even amidst chaos. "I understand, Anakin Skywalker. I understand the rage of seeing slavery perpetuated, the fury of watching helpless beings suffer. But understand this, survival is not betrayal. Living to fight injustice tomorrow does not make you complicit in today's losses. The Goa'uld taught me many lessons. The hardest was learning that I could not save everyone, but I could honor those who fell by ensuring their sacrifice meant something." A particularly large explosion shook the facility, and Carter's voice crackled through their comms. "Colonel, the interdiction field is down. Thor can transport now, but we've got maybe 60 seconds before the attackers adapt." O'Neill made the command decision. "Thor, emergency transport. Everyone in this chamber, maximum capacity, get them to the Beliskner or to safety zones. Do it now." White light filled the gestation chamber as Asgard transport beams activated in rapid sequence. Clones and portable gestation pods vanished. Kaminoan technicians disappeared mid-motion. The Jedi, SG-1, and as many beings as Thor's systems could handle were pulled from the dying facility. O'Neill materialized on the Beliskner's bridge to find controlled chaos. Rescued clones being triaged, Kaminoans demanding explanations, alarms indicating that Tipoca City's main power core was in critical failure, about to explode with enough force to devastate the entire facility. "Everyone we could save is aboard," Thor reported. "But the facility is lost. I estimate 30 seconds until core breach." Through the viewport, they watched Tipoca City's lights flicker and die. Then, with the silence unique to vacuum, the entire complex erupted. Not in fire. There was no oxygen for burning, but in expansion, in fracture, in the slow-motion disintegration of centuries of work. The gestation chambers they couldn't reach. The genetic databases they couldn't save. The millions of clones in development who never got the chance to live, even the constrained life the Kaminoans had designed for them. All of it gone. The genetic data? O'Neill asked quietly. "I managed to save approximately 15% before the purge completed," Daniel reported, his voice heavy with exhaustion and failure. "Templates for a few dozen species, some research notes, fragments of the Mandalorian genome. Better than nothing, but nowhere near what the Asgard needed." Carter appeared on the bridge, her uniform torn and scorched from the battle in the computer core. "Thor, did you trace the control signal source?" "Yes, Major. The attack was coordinated from within the Senate building, specifically from administrative offices connected to the Supreme Chancellor's suite. However, I cannot determine which individual initiated the commands. The authorization codes were heavily encrypted and routed through multiple relays. Palpatine, Obi-Wan said, the word carrying the weight of a terrible certainty. It has to be. No one else has that level of access, that degree of resources, that capacity for long-term planning. But we can't prove it, O'Neill said. All we have is Thor's analysis, which any Republic court would challenge as unreliable alien technology. We have suspicions, patterns, circumstantial connections. Nothing definitive. Lama Su approached, his elongated form somehow diminished by defeat. You understand what has been lost. Kamino's entire genetic library. Centuries of research. The cloning techniques that made us indispensable to the Republic. All destroyed. Not all, Taunwi said, entering with a data chip held carefully in her long fingers. I managed to secure our most critical templates before the purge, the Jango Fett genome, key species markers, essential research protocols. Enough to rebuild, though it will take decades. And, she looked at Carter. I saved the stabilization techniques you shared. At least those weren't lost. Small mercies, Daniel muttered. The Beliskner turned away from Kamino's devastation, preparing to jump to hyperspace. But before Thor could engage the drives, a new contact appeared on sensors, a single ship, small and fast, broadcasting Jedi Council authorization codes. It's Master Windu, Obi-Wan said, accepting the communication. He's requesting immediate conference. Mace Windu's holographic form appeared, and his expression was grim. SG-1, we've received reports about Kamino. But that's not why I'm contacting you. The Chancellor has issued an emergency decree. All extragalactic visitors are to be placed under protective custody pending investigation of potential espionage activities. He claims you've been sharing Republic military technology with Separatist agents. That's insane, Carter protested. We've been working exclusively with Republic-approved facilities. Which is exactly what makes the accusation effective, Mace said. Palpatine has positioned this perfectly. Either you submit to custody, where you'll be isolated, questioned, and eventually discredited, or you resist, which proves you have something to hide. Either way, you're neutralized as a threat to whatever he's planning. So we run, O'Neill said flatly. We leave the galaxy, abandon the Asgard's mission, and let Palpatine win. Or, Yoda's voice joined the conversation as his small form appeared beside Mace, help us, you do. Evidence gather, we need. Proof that connects the Chancellor to the Sith, to the war's manipulation, to atrocities like Kamino's destruction. Trust in the Force, I do. But trust in evidence, the Senate will. Help us find it, and together, end this deception we can. O'Neill looked at his team. Carter's expression was determined, she wasn't giving up on the Asgard or on uncovering the truth. Daniel's eyes held the stubborn resolve of someone who'd seen injustice and refused to walk away. Teal'c stood ready, the warrior who'd broken free from slavery once and would help others do the same, regardless of personal cost. All right, O'Neill said finally. We're in. But we do this smart. No more walking into traps, no more reacting to crises someone else manufactured. We go on offense. We investigate Palpatine directly, find proof of his connection to the Sith, and expose this entire conspiracy before he can spring whatever final trap he's planning. Dangerous, this will be, Yoda warned. Underestimate a Sith Lord, you cannot. Prepared for anything, we must be. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt, O'Neill said. Thor, set course for Coruscant. But keep us cloaked and ready to run if things go sideways. This is an intelligence mission now, not diplomacy. Understood, Colonel. As the Beliskner jumped to hyperspace, leaving Kamino's ruins behind, the weight of what they'd undertaken settled over SG-1. They were no longer neutral observers seeking genetic research. They were active participants in a conflict that had been orchestrated for purposes they were only beginning to understand. Somewhere on Coruscant, Darth Sidious felt the currents of the Force shift as his trap evolved beyond its initial parameters. SG-1 had survived Kamino, had saved fragments of genetic data, had become more invested in the galaxy's fate rather than fleeing as he'd anticipated. But Sidious had orchestrated the Clone Wars across 3 years and 1,000 systems. He had turned every setback into advantage, every threat into opportunity. These visitors from another galaxy believed they were becoming hunters, seeking to expose his machinations. They didn't understand they were still prey. They'd simply moved to a different part of the maze, one where the walls would close more slowly, where the danger would seem more manageable, where they'd invest everything. Their technology, their expertise, their lives, before realizing the trap had never been about capturing them. It had been about using them. The Asgard genetic research would continue, but now under conditions Sidious controlled. The technology sharing would proceed, but directed toward purposes that served the Sith. And when Order 66 finally executed, when the Jedi were eliminated and the Republic transformed into Empire, SG-1 would discover they'd helped build the very tyranny they'd hoped to prevent. The pieces were almost in position. Soon, very soon, the game would enter its final phase. And Darth Sidious, who had spent a lifetime turning hope into despair and freedom into chains, would show these extragalactic visitors what true power looked like. The galaxy would burn. And from the ashes, the Sith Empire would rise, armed with technology from beyond the stars and built on the ruins of everything SG-1 had tried to save. The war for the soul of the galaxy had entered a new phase. SG-1 and the Asgard had come seeking salvation through genetic research and found themselves embroiled in a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of Republic power. The Kaminoan facilities lay in ruins, their genetic databases destroyed, but fragments remained, enough to give the Asgard hope, not enough to complete their mission. On Coruscant, in the shadows of the Senate building, evidence waited to be uncovered. Financial records connecting Palpatine to the Sith, communications proving his manipulation of both Republic and Separatist forces, proof that the Clone Wars were orchestrated rather than organic. But gathering that evidence would require SG-1 to operate as they never had before, not as diplomats or soldiers, but as spies infiltrating the heart of galactic power. The Jedi Council, finally acknowledging the darkness they'd sensed but couldn't name, stood ready to act if proof could be provided. Bail Organa's network of Alderaanian intelligence assets began tracing the financial breadcrumbs. And across the galaxy, in Mandalorian space and neutral systems and even within Separatist territories, beings who'd encountered SG-1 began questioning the narratives they'd been fed about the war. The Asgard watched from orbit, their dying civilization depending on the success of 4 humans and their allies. Thor calculated probabilities and found them discouraging. The odds of exposing a Sith Lord who'd hidden for decades were minimal. The chances of surviving such exposure were worse. But O'Neill had built a career on beating impossible odds. Carter had solved problems that pure mathematics said were unsolvable. Daniel had talked his way past obstacles that should have been insurmountable. And Teal'c had broken chains that were supposed to be unbreakable. Together, they'd faced gold system lords and ancient entities and impossible choices across 100 worlds. This galaxy, for all its complexity and danger, was just another mission. Just another fight against tyranny wearing a civilized face. And if there was one thing SG-1 had proven across years of service, it was that they didn't quit. Not when the stakes were high. Not when the odds were poor. Not when everything seemed lost. The investigation would continue. The truth would be uncovered. And when the final confrontation came, when Darth Sidious's plans reached their culmination and the Republic stood on the edge of transformation into Empire, SG-1 would be there, armed with Asgard technology and Earth stubbornness and the determination to ensure that this galaxy, like their own, had a chance to choose freedom over tyranny. The Clone Wars raged on. But now they were watched by eyes that saw patterns others missed, investigated by minds that refused to accept convenient narratives, and opposed by warriors who understood that sometimes the greatest battles weren't fought with weapons, but with truth. And in the darkness, Darth Sidious prepared his final moves, confident in his ultimate victory but just beginning, to wonder if perhaps these visitors from beyond the rim might be more dangerous than he'd anticipated. The galaxy held its breath. And in the space between stars, where ancient powers stirred and impossible technologies merged with mystical forces, the outcome remained uncertain. One thing was clear: nothing would ever be the same.